Welcome to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard. Well, you know.
That's not a rib.
She pooted.
Is that a rib?
No, you haven't been.
There's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared of shit.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love you.
Give me double cheeseburger, double cheese, double mayo, double onion, mother.
You're nothing but an egg-sucking dog.
Hey everybody, welcome to Something to Wrestle. Bruce Prichard. What's going on, man?
Hey. Well, it's another day in paradise. It's great. Hear any rumors or innuendo or anything?
I heard that Turo is a peer-to-peer car sharing marketplace where you can book any car you want whenever you want from a community of local hosts, from exotic cars to sports cars to practical daily drivers. You can choose the best car for you, whatever your budget. Download the Turo app. That's Turo on the App Store or Google Play, or visit Turo.com. Get $25 off your first trip when you sign up for Turo and use the promo code Wrestle at checkout. Terms apply. You should probably
right, they do.
You should probably write that down, Bruce, because you're gonna be out of town a lot, and you might need some cars. And they can probably help you out.
Well, absolutely they can. Everywhere you are, they're all over the place, and the app's so easy to follow and get on there. So check out Turo.com and help support the show.
Yeah. Tonight, Mohegan Sun.
If you're listening on Friday, if you're listening on Saturday, it was last night. It was a hell of a show.
Yeah, we hope so. Eric Bischoff, Bruce Prichard, one last time. BrucePrichard.com has your tickets. And Crown Point, Indiana, never going there again. March 9th, tickets on sale now. BrucePrichard.com. Cleveland, Ohio, probably sold out, but if not, BrucePrichard.com. If you want to see Bruce in Australia, probably your last chance. March 22nd, 23rd, 24th. Tickets are on sale. BrucePrichard.com. April, we finally announced our WrestleMania weekend. And I think tickets are sold out or almost sold out right now at BrucePrichard.com. The day before WrestleMania in Gramercy Theater, as Bruce used to say here on the show. But now, we've got exciting news, and we're very excited because JR is going to join us the Monday night after WrestleMania. So the Raw after WrestleMania is always the biggest show of the year. JR and I will probably start the show, and eventually Bruce Prichard will make an appearance, and this is going to happen just steps from the Barclays Center in Manhattan. So be there on April 8th. And the venue, I think, is called Murmur, which is an interesting building name. But don't worry about that. Tickets are on sale now at BrucePrichard.com. And after everyone in the crowd has been heavily drinking for a couple hours, and WrestleMania weekend is, for all intents and purposes, over, I'm sure that will be a star-studded affair, and people will be looking to blow off some steam. So go to BrucePrichard.com. And if you're international and you can't get tickets there, you can email hello@murmrr.com. That's hello@murmrr.com, and place your ticket order. They'll help you out because the site, for whatever reason, will not let you place your ticket order. But if you've been reading the tea leaves, JR and Bruce Prichard on stage at the same time, probably not happening again. So BrucePrichard.com is your place to get that ticket.
You know what I've learned in recent weeks, Conrad?
What's that?
You never say never.
Well, if you've learned anything in these last few weeks, it's never say never. But I never thought that we would sit down and discuss The Undertaker running through not one, but two murders that we did last week when he murdered Muhammad Hassan. Of course, he murdered.
No murders.
Okay.
No murders.
All right.
There was no murdering done.
What was the feedback that you got, or did anyone even notice?
A lot of people noticed. It was, for the most part that I got, people seemed to enjoy the show quite a bit. It was probably not the best few years of Undertaker's career. However, I think that people enjoyed going back and reminiscing and reliving a lot of it.
Well, there was some bad decisions made with The Undertaker, and we talk a lot about bad decisions made here on the show. And I've got good news. If you're a small business owner and you feel like you've got some bad business decisions you're trying to avoid, well, we reach out to our man, Jamie, over at Ohana Enterprises. Jamie's not just a consultant. He's owned and operated businesses for more than 2 decades, over 25 years, in fact. He knows what you're going through. And he started Ohana because he got sick and tired of hiring outsiders who would just give him some textbook advice or design a website and then just keep asking for more money. Jamie and Ohana want to help your business succeed, and they can help you with projects big or small, from businesses, marketing plans to websites and hiring. Maybe it's something like social media. You know you have to do it, but you don't know where to start. Well, they'll do it for you. Or best of all, as a business owner, you might just want someone to call or email for help, advice, or guidance, just a sounding board, and Ohana is there for you. But Jamie and his team aren't just for businesses, they can help individuals too. They can help you rewrite a resume, writing a cover letter, even finding target companies for you to apply to. Jamie owned and operated Chaotic Wrestling for 18 years, one of the best wrestling promotions in the Northeast. There's a bunch of wrestlers today who you've probably heard of who got their start there. So if you're a pro wrestler who wants to get out there and build your career, get in touch with Jamie. No matter what you are, where you are in your career, you want to build a business for yourself, go to ohanane.com or email them at info@ohanane.com. Stop wasting your time and money and let them help you start making some money in your business today. Bruce, let's talk about today's topic. The real reason we're here. You know, people have been waiting with bated breath for this. I think people knew it was coming. And I know we have avoided talking about it. And people wondered if we were ever going to talk about it, if we were ever going to address it. And now's the time. It's all about Jerry Lawler here today on Something to Wrestle. Jerry Lawler is a legend in professional wrestling, a Hall of Famer long before he ever made his way to the WWE in '92. And it would take multiple shows to cover all of his accomplishments. We're going to try to break down most of his WWE run today, and it is a doozy. But before we get into all that, when did you first see or hear about the legendary Jerry Lawler?
You know, the first time was obviously through the wrestling magazines that were out. That was how you learned about other territories. That's how you learned about other places other than what you saw on your local television show. So Jerry Lawler was someone that I read in magazines about, the King of Memphis and so on and so forth. First time I ever saw Jerry live was in Houston. He came in through the Southwest Championship Wrestling, the booking office in San Antonio, and came in and worked a little bit with Bob Sweetan and some different people. But the one thing about Lawler that was so great was his promos. His promos were incredible, and Jerry could definitely talk people into the building as a heel, especially. But damn it, he could turn on a dime, and he had a very believable babyface promo as well. But it was early '80s, and then from there, I had the opportunity to meet him and be around him in Memphis when my brother Tom was working there in the early '80s as well.
Try to briefly explain to people who didn't grow up in the era or maybe don't know much about Memphis what Jerry Lawler meant and represented to Memphis.
Well, I think for people that kind of grew up in the Hulk Hogan era of WWF, that Jerry Lawler was the Hulk Hogan of Memphis wrestling. He was the biggest star. Everybody in Memphis knew him, whether you were a wrestling fan or not. You knew who the King was. You knew who Jerry Lawler was. Memphis had a special, they had a television show that was live every Saturday out of the WMC studios, I believe. And Lawler came into your living rooms, man, every single Saturday morning. Everybody knew Jerry Lawler, and Jerry was a top draw there as a heel, as a baby face. He ran the gambit. He was the king, self-proclaimed king of Memphis. So obviously there was a way to steal the luster of the king, Elvis Presley, the real king of Memphis. But Jerry Lawler was a mega star in Memphis, and that through that reputation allowed him to go into other areas like Florida, like Atlanta, like Texas, and come into a few shots off of his reputation in Tennessee and head on out, give him a little rest in Tennessee for a few weeks or what have you, work a program and be gone. But he was a huge draw, and probably the biggest name in Memphis wrestling history.
You know, I know you weren't there, so it's hard for you to really tell the full story, but as best you can, tell everybody the story of how Jerry got his start in wrestling, because I do think that it's an unusual way to get in, is it not?
Well, yeah, because Jerry was an artist, and a great artist, by the way. I have a lot of his work. he's done for me over the years, and Jerry, his artistic ability was able to kind of get him in to the local promotion there in Memphis. So Lawler made a deal with the promoter locally and said, hey, I'll give you free publicity with some of my artwork and different things if you'll teach me how to wrestle. And they started teaching him how to wrestle, and they quickly found that Lawler had the gift of gab, and he was able to, as I said, man, talk people into the building, and they brought him in. He picked it up fairly quickly, but there was something special about him. He had a twinkle in his eye that made him different than the rest. And I dare say that even today, when you see Jerry Lawler, there's something about him that is very special, and he has that star appeal.
Probably not a surprise to people who've enjoyed his work on Monday Night Raw that when he first gets his big break in wrestling, he was actually working as a disc jockey. So he had broadcast experience long before maybe we ever knew it. As the top star in Memphis, he eventually leveraged his position in the company to become an owner, which is a rather unique situation. I mean, it's not like today, you know, Roman Reigns or John Cena or somebody like that is going to become, you know, partners with Vince McMahon. But this was a unique situation, to say the least. And it was with your old pal, Jerry Jarrett.
Well, you know, what was unique about it was there was a wrestling war going on, and there was an opportunity at the time for Lance Russell, who was the voice of Memphis wrestling for many years, to break away and go with this other promoter. And Jerry Jarrett felt that, you know, hell, I'm losing my voice, that trusted voice for many years. And Jerry Lawler was also going to go with Lance and start this new promotion, which kind of forced Jarrett's hand to come back to Lawler and say, hey, I'll make you a partner. He didn't want Lawler to leave. Lawler was his biggest star and his biggest draw. So to entice Jerry not to leave, he made Jerry a partner. And I believe that they kind of cut Lance out at first because it was Lance's deal in the beginning, and eventually bridges were mended and they brought Lance back into the fold. But yeah, Jarrett had to make Lawler a partner to keep him and not lose his biggest star.
It's a pretty amazing story. And he had a ton of major moments in professional wrestling history there. There's the famous empty arena match with the great Terry Funk. Incredible feuds with Austin Idol, Bill Dundee, Dutch Mantell. Of course, before all of that, you know, one of the biggest names in Memphis history, at least, Jackie Fargo, the innovator of that crazy strut. He had matches with a young Hulk Hogan, King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant. He even wrestled Ric Flair for the NWA World title. But maybe the thing that is most memorable of all about Jerry in Memphis is Andy Kaufman. And we've touched on that a little bit. What did you think from the outside? You know, you're in the wrestling business, you're around the wrestling business, and you see this Andy Kaufman thing happen. And allegedly it was offered to Vince Sr. first, and he passed, and Bill Apter made the connection, and Kaufman wound up in Memphis. From the outside looking in, what did the rest of the wrestling world think?
That Jerry Lawler was lauded a hero by shutting up the big mouth of some Hollywood movie star, bad-mouthing the wrestling business. Not everybody was smartened up to it. And that was the genius of the angle, that Kaufman did his thing completely independent of the wrestling business, while at the same time working with Jerry Lawler to come in and do this angle and shoot the angle with Jerry, that people thought, even in the wrestling business, even people in the territory at the time, they accepted this as, okay, it's a great opportunity for Jerry to get in the ring and get some publicity with this major actor. He was a major actor on Taxi at the time. Shoot the angle, which again, nobody was really smartened up to, other than Kaufman and Lawler, maybe Jerry Jarrett or whoever else needed to know. But the promoters around the world, Paul Bosch in Houston, Texas, this is a story Lawler loves to tell. Paul Bosch sent Lawler a telegram the day after it happened, because it made the news everywhere. It made the news here in Houston. Paul sent Lawler a telegram congratulating him for keeping the faith and teaching people that professional wrestling is nothing to be fucked with. And thank you, Jerry, for protecting the business the way you did and sending that little pipsqueak out on a stretcher. It's pretty incredible shit.
It's great stuff. Of course, if you've missed any of the phenomenal stuff with Andy Kaufman, you should go out of your way to watch the documentaries that have been done about it. And of course, most famously, the movie that Jerry himself appeared in, Man on the Moon. Would you recommend that documentary that came out in the last year or so with Jim Carrey, all about Andy Kaufman?
Definitely. Yeah. Because you get a little bit of a peek into the mind, and Andy Kaufman had a brilliant mind, a comedic timing. And he just, I think that so much of what Andy Kaufman did in comedy, he learned from professional wrestling. He was a big fan his whole life, but he was brilliant in the way that he portrayed himself, and he stayed in character at all times. Like a great wrestler, a great heel, or a great babyface back in the day, they were in character 24 hours a day. Andy Kaufman was in character 24 hours a day.
You should go out of your way to watch their segment on David Letterman as well, because that's really what took it mainstream. It was something to see. Let me just tell you, you should YouTube it. If you want to see that documentary we've talked about maybe a few times now, it's called Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond. I think it's on Netflix. I'm pretty sure it is. But it's worth going out of your way to see if you're a fan of comedy or wrestling or even just documentaries. It's a hell of a movie. So let's keep it going here. And by the way, I can't recommend enough, go watch that angle, and specifically the Letterman appearance. I think you'll appreciate it. The bad news is Andy passes away from lung cancer. There's no telling, what he would have continued to do and tinker with wrestling in the coming years as some sort of a personality. Cause when he died, he was only 35 years old, but Lawler's career rolls on. And as the territories start to die down, Memphis's business dips a little bit. Everybody's trying to combine territories. Hey, what if the USWA did business with World Class? And, what if we got the AWA involved? So there's this unification matches. There's just a lot of stuff going on where everybody is trying to compete with the new monster WWF that's gone national. And there's a great honor bestowed upon Jerry, even though it is sort of late in the game. In May of '88, he beats Kurt Hennig, the future Mr. Perfect, to win the AWA world title And I think that's sort of interesting that despite all the accolades that Jerry had, I mean, he was Mr. Memphis and probably won that belt 4,000 times. The AWA world title is really the only major world title, never WWE or the NWA or WCW, just the AWA. What did the AWA title mean by May of 88?
Nothing. Probably less than nothing. It was at a point that Vern had pretty much given up on the business, and not given up, but they were a shell of what they used to be as a promotion. They were looking for that one last ditch effort. And Jerry Lawler was a link to the other side. He was that link that, as far as wrestling fans, people knew who he was, but as far as the guy sitting at home in Tacoma, Washington, that saw on the news Jerry Lawler pile driving Andy Kaufman and breaking his neck, they knew who that guy was. And that's what the AWA felt that they needed. They needed a star, the magnitude of a Jerry Lawler, that had some of that crossover appeal, that had some of that. I remember him. He's the guy that beat up Andy Kaufman.
Right.
So that was what they were really looking to do. And it wasn't something so much as, Jerry Lawler's our guy to be the champion. They were looking for somebody to be that crossover that they would be recognized.
Let's talk about, the writing on the wall. Everybody's sort of fighting to survive, as we talked about. And before Jerry ever comes to the WWF, he actually sues the company, specifically because whenever they would come to Tennessee, whether it was Memphis or Nashville, they would advertise the King. Now, of course, on TV, they had positioned Harley Race to be the King. So they're calling him King Harley Race. So this would have been 87, 88 ish. And they're never mentioning him by name to say the full King Harley Race. And they're never saying Jerry Lawler. They're just saying, and the King will be in action. And so, it was slick advertising, but Lawler took offense and sued, and it never goes to court. But he eventually makes it very clear, because he's so well connected, that when they're in Nashville, the local sheriff goes down and actually holds up the proceeds from the event. He keeps the whole gate and holds it up because they had been promoting the King. Eventually, of course, that was all figured out, and they never promoted the King coming to town again. Did you ever hear this story?
Yeah, I heard the story. It goes kind of hand in hand with going back in maybe 1980, I don't know, it was early 80s, maybe late 70s, when the NWA used to have these conventions in Las Vegas. And one of the bones of contention at the convention was a headline in one of Bill Apter's magazine that said, and Bill Apter loves it when we call it the Apter Mags. It was actually Stanley Weston that owned it, but Apter was a photographer and people. Anyway, the headline was "The Night a Midget Beat the Giant." And it had a shot of Jerry Lawler and Andre the Giant, where Lawler had put himself over in a DQ or a count out against Andre the Giant. And Vince McMahon, Vince's Kennedy's father, was irate that he had booked Andre out, and then they have a quote midget. That was the headline,
right?
Beating the Giant. So you add that on to now WWF's coming in and they have a King and Harley Race. And I think it was a little bit of
pissing contest.
Here's right back at you, buddy. So I think in the beginning, back in that time frame, it was a little bit of okay, I'll do this to you, you do this to me. So it was not a lot of love lost there.
It's funny though, because that really has been your company's MO for a while. Even with WCW, they would sign Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, and then you guys would go put on the Huckster and the Nacho Man. That's just, I don't say that in a mean way. It's just being competitive, right? It's the cutthroat nature of business, and kill or be killed, right?
It's business. And Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage made their name in the WWF. So it was something that other people were now capitalizing on. Yeah, you're going to fight fire with fire.
So eventually, Lawler decides, if I can't beat him, join him. And Jerry would write, I don't remember exactly how it came about. They offered both Jerry Jarrett and me a job. What had always been the case was you had to go work for Vince McMahon and the World Wrestling Federation exclusively, but they offered a deal to Jerry and me where we could work for them and still have our own territory. Boy, that sounds nice. It was a situation that would be beneficial to everybody. Vince realized it would be bad if all the smaller territories went out of business. There would be no training ground. He didn't really have a place where he could bring young talent along. Everybody who was going on his TV needed to be seasoned, well-trained entertainers. So that's how Jerry and I went to work for Vince. Jerry went as a booker and I went as a wrestler. I was always thought of as a real good worker, but I was known as a good or better interviewer than I was as a worker. I was wrestling, but I immediately started doing the King's Court every week. Where were you in your tenure with the company? Are you here when they come in?
Yeah, I think Jerry's got it. And maybe, I don't know, but I could tell you the way that Jerry Lawler was first brought up and how he came in, because Jerry Jarrett had been on as the consultant for Vince, or if you'd listen to Jerry Jarrett, he's going to run the company. But Jerry Lawler was not working as a wrestler, did not come in as a deal with Jerry Jarrett. He was in business with Jerry Jarrett. Jerry Jarrett was consulting on a consulting deal with Vince, which meant he would talk to him on Sundays. We were in a position where Jesse Ventura was gone, and we needed a color commentator to work with Vince on Superstars, which was the flagship show at the time. That was a syndication. That was the show that drove all the live events and everything that we did. We were trying to come up with a lot of different people to come in and be that color guy. Michael Hayes was a name that was brought up. Michael, there was still a really bad taste in everyone's mouth from the time that Michael and the Freebirds had their 3-week whirlwind tour of the WWF back in the day. And we were sitting in the boardroom in the 4th floor, and I brought up Jerry Lawler because of his promos. I thought, well, Jerry Lawler can talk,
Sure.
and he's controversial. From my vantage point, and it was also at a time that Vince had, oh God, the stupidest, shittiest idea on the face of God's green earth, Rio Rogers. I was the Wizard at the time. No, this is before Rio Rogers. It was the Wizard. It wasn't Rio. I had done commentary for 3 weeks worth of Superstars, and it was absolutely god awful, horrible. It was terrible. I'm not a good color guy. I don't think I'm a good play-by-play guy either, but still, it just didn't mesh. It wasn't good. And I was doing everything I could to have somebody else in that position, because it's a no-win position when you're working with Vince every week.
Right.
On air. I suggested Lawler. Vince kind of tried it on, and then Pat jumped on and was like, yeah, you know, what about it? He's a good talker. He cuts great promos. Then the call was made to Jarrett to say, hey, is this something that Lawler might be interested in? So we extended the invitation to Jerry Lawler to come in, and Jerry was first brought in as a color commentator. Then we started with the King's Court, and that was, again, one of my ideas, from the Piper's Pit
Sure.
to the Brother Love show to here's another way for Lawler to get heat and have exposure on different shows. So let's use him as a color commentator on one. He's going to be the counter to Bobby Heenan on the Challenge. And then let's use him as a guy that's going to get heat. And if we ever need him to work, he can work. Do the King's Court bit. So it was my recollection, the chain of events were we needed a color commentator, brought Lawler in as color commentator. We used him for the other show on the King's Court. And the rest, as I say, is history. And it worked out pretty good. And you also had the ability to have him wrestle from time to time. He was never, ever being brought in to be a full-time wrestler ever in his entire tenure that I know of.
I want to circle back to something you said that I just immediately said, sure. But I know that some of our listeners are going to want to know, what did you mean when you said working with Vince on air every day is a no-win, every week is a no-win situation?
Because you're just on the hot seat, and everything you do, I'm trying to produce then I'm trying to be a talent, and it's just tough, and you're in the hot seat all the time, and it's not a comfortable place to be because everything is being critiqued and everything is being just produced and overproduced at that point. From a talent standpoint, I knew I wasn't the guy.
Right.
I wasn't good. It sucked. I mean, it really did. But producing a color guy all day long, being a color guy, play-by-play guy, not my bag, man. I just wasn't good at it, and I didn't want to be in that hot seat.
Well, it's funny how eventually, things change and you're comfortable in the hot seat. Here's what Meltzer wrote. Hell froze over at some point this past week. After all, isn't that basically what Lawler had said it would have to happen for him to go to the WWF? Lawler was hired this past week to be the heel color commentator on the Superstar show with Vince McMahon, replacing Mr. Perfect, who is back on the road full-time as a babyface wrestler. Lawler's main duties will be doing the commentary, but he'll also work as a heel wrestler on occasional major shows, starting with the Royal Rumble in Sacramento. The 43-year-old Lawler was introduced as Jerry the King Lawler as an announcer on Primetime Wrestling on December 7th. From the word we've received, Lawler was surprised to have been contacted by Titan about the opening caused by the emergency angle that put Perfect back in the ring. He made it clear that he wouldn't go on the road for the WWF as a wrestler full time, which apparently was mutually agreed upon. Lawler's duties will involve a minimum traveling, just flying to Connecticut to the Titan offices every few weeks to do in-studio voiceover work with McMahon on the Superstar show and for other television work, along with occasional appearances at major shows. It's a big deal to have one of the all-time greats of professional wrestling come in. And it's even bigger deal in this era when he gets to keep his name. You guys didn't do that a ton. You certainly don't do it a ton now. But Ric Flair came in as Ric Flair and Jerry Lawler came in as Jerry Lawler. We've often heard that, there can be an anti-Southern bias in Vince McMahon's organization. What did Vince think of the legacy that Lawler had created for himself, or did that really matter? Was it just right place, right time?
Well, first of all, I'll go back and correct myself. I said the vacancy because of Jesse Ventura. It was because of Mr. Perfect. But there was no, first of all, I don't consider Jerry Lawler doesn't have a Southern twang or really a Southern drawl. At least I don't think so, but
no, I wasn't referencing that. I'm just saying, sometimes even here on the show, and I know you do a lot of this tongue in cheek, you say, oh, that Memphis bullshit. So it's just sort of dismissive of that Southern type of wrestling. I don't necessarily mean an accent, not like the one I have. I just mean in terms of, his style of wrestling and what Memphis studio wrestling was perceived to be by Vince.
But and again, going back, we never wanted Lawler as a wrestler. The fact that he could step in, that was a bonus. We were looking for somebody to fill that color commentary spot. The beauty of it was when Jerry came in, he and Vince hit it off right away. They started to do their commentary back and forth, and it just clicked. It was like they'd been doing it their whole life. They fit. It was like peas in a pod. It was like peanut butter and jelly. So there wasn't a big concern. The Memphis shit is the Memphis shit. That is what it is. But Jerry Lawler on his own had star appeal. He was very good at what he did, and he was able to step into that role without a whole lot of prep and without a whole lot of work. So from the producer standpoint, it was, damn, now this is easy. This is fun because Lawler was so quick-witted and he was having fun with it. And it was a new character for the WWF audience.
Did he come in with any heat?
Oh, I'm sure he had a ton of heat. Oh God, from the boys, anybody that had worked Memphis, I would say had heat, right or wrong, with Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett, because they felt they were the owners, and Memphis was never known as a great place to get great payoffs. And you worked in, not horrendous trips, but you're always on the road. And unless you were on top, you didn't make a lot of money. That was the reputation. Fair or not, that was the reputation.
I like that you said fair or not. And I feel like you say that because you're sympathetic to the position that someone in the office would be. Is that from your time in the WWF or with Bosch, or both?
Both, because a lot of times from the talent standpoint, they're only going to look at it from the talent standpoint.
Sure.
When you have done both, you can see both sides of it. So from the office standpoint, from a managerial standpoint, you have to view creative, you have to view talent very differently than you do when you are a talent, because as a talent, you consider yourself the most important thing in the world. And you don't have a real good 20/20 view.
Something else I've wanted to ask: when Jerry comes into the WWF, he's a heel and he does a phenomenal job. But what's interesting about that to me is that he is the most over baby face in Memphis. How did he reconcile that?
He's the king. And Jerry would spin his story in Memphis talking about the reason that he is a heel is because he's in the WWF working with Vince McMahon, and that he is against everything that is the WWF. So in Memphis, he was anti-WWF and spun that story and told it that way, which was genius. And they bought it because he was their king and they believed every word that came out of his mouth.
A few days after he signs with the WWF, he defeats Coco Beware to regain the USWA title in Memphis on December 12th. He would wind up holding it 28 times, which has to be a record. Let's talk about King's Court. You have told us that it was sort of patterned after the original, I guess the OG of those type of segments, Roddy Piper. And Jerry would write that Vince asked him about it, but he said he'd never done anything like it and didn't think he could. But Vince has given him a show where he would do an interview, and during a commercial break, they'd roll out a big red carpet in the ring and then bringing this giant throne and throw together some other, royal paraphernalia. They'd play his music and he'd introduce it, and he'd address the peons in the crowd and say they should all be on their hands and knees, kissing his royal feet. And then he would interview a wrestler. And then occasionally, he would do something at a house show or whatever. Pretty basic formula for the segment, or do any really stand out to you?
Pretty basic. It was selfish on our part. And we wanted to get as much Jerry Lawler as we could and get his strongest point. It's funny. He says he never did anything like that. Part of the idea to have him do it was from the talk show stuff that he used to do in Memphis.
Right.
As a host, and he would tear his guests up. So I knew he could do it. And I thought he did a great job in the King's Court, but it was another way of, instead of having an interviewer there talk to talent, it was more entertaining to have a character, another talent there. And Lawler knew how to get guys over and at his expense, but he also knew how to keep his heat. And that's a beautiful art.
Well, he kept the heat backstage. We sort of talked about, hey, did he have heat? I guess we should address the rumor and innuendo. It's been alleged that somebody somewhere very early into his run, well, this is just a weird thing to say. Here goes. Somebody took a shit in his crown. True? Not true? When did you hear about it? What did you hear? What was the reaction to, somebody taking a dump in the King's crown?
Jerry used to bring the crown in like a bag you would get it at the supermarket.
Yep.
Or at the airport, and he would carry the bag in that. And yeah, I think the first time that he was at a TV or a live event, what have you, he came back and there was some poo-poo in the crown. And I think Jerry just took it and threw it in the trash and went on, didn't sell it. Didn't put it over one way or the other. Didn't let anybody know that it got to him in any way, shape, or form. But you could tell that it was Uncomfortable. But through the years, I think anybody that had been through that Memphis territory looked at Lawler as the guy that was responsible for them not making money there or what have you, or them putting them in a bad position. So, yeah, Jerry, he was the butt of a few nasty ribs when he first came in. I don't remember if it was Jerry or Dusty that they put the knife in the back of their jacket and in the locker room, and they put a knife in the back of their jacket. I think that was Dusty.
Wow.
But they let Jerry know that, hey, welcome to the WWF, and we haven't forgotten.
Jerry wrote, the next day I went to Vince McMahon and I said, Vince, I don't think my being here is going to work out. I told him what happened and that I didn't need that. There's obviously some hard feelings and I'd rather go back to what I was doing. Nobody ever crapped in my crown in Memphis. He said it would never happen again and promised he'd put a stop to it. And I guess he put the word out because nothing like that ever did happen again. Hypothetically, how did you hear about this? Does Vince give you a call? What's that sound like?
No, I heard about it at the TV. It was a buzz around the locker room that, hey, wait till Lawler goes to put on his crown, or wait till Lawler goes to get his crown.
Listen, I don't know how many more times we're going to get to do this. Can you just fucking pretend to be Vince McMahon yelling about not sitting?
I'm getting there.
Thank you.
And so there was buzz about it, I think, even before, Jerry got to see it. And so Jerry goes and discovers it and comes in, and Vince had to, God damn it, no more shitting in crowns. So that was the end of it. But Vince let everybody know, okay, you had your fun. You said whatever it is you want to say, but if you really want to be a man, go face him face to face, and don't destroy personal property, and don't fuck with somebody's gimmick. And it's childish, but the business was a different business in those days. And that's how guys kind of express their, either like you or don't like you. So it never happened after that. They made their point and moved on. But the best thing Jerry did was not sell it.
Right.
He just moved on.
Jerry is a teetotaler. He's never done drugs, never done alcohol, blah, blah, blah. How did he get along with Bobby Heenan? Because Bobby, while you would think just based on their charm and wit, they would have a lot in common, they did not have that in common.
No, they didn't, but they had a basic love of the business, and they were both great at what they did. So there was a mutual respect there from a talent standpoint.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of guys that, that didn't drink. Well, now more than there was then, but no, not a prerequisite to like somebody.
Let's talk about his first appearance. Royal Rumble 93 is his first pay-per-view appearance for the company. He comes in at number 7. He eliminates Max Moon, roll title Nat, but he's thrown out by Mr. Perfect. What did Vince think of Lawler as a professional wrestler, not just as a personality and, doing the interview bits and commentary, but actual bell to bell? At that point, it's still very much a transition for the company. You used to be the land of the giants. Now you're trying to transition. Lawler's not either one, really. What was Vince's take on him as an in-ring performer?
First of all, Lawler was never meant to come in and be a worker and wrestle, especially on a regular basis, because Jerry was set to come in and do the commentary. Then he would go back and do his Memphis gig. That was the agreement up front, pretty much, at least our understanding of it. However, for a Royal Rumble, it's the Royal Rumble. Of course, you would have royalty in it. You would have the king. So it's logical for Jerry Lawler to enter the thing. And it was also good for him to cut the promos about the Royal Rumble, and it'll finally be royally because the king will be in it. So that all made sense, and it was logical. And as we go on, we found other things that here and there that kind of made sense for Lawler. But as we go on, I'll go to the one instance that Jerry got over bigger than anything with one little thing he did later on in his tenure here. And it was one of the first times that he was in a major deal with Bret Hart, as we'll talk about here in a little bit.
Well, instead, let's talk about him working house shows with his old pal, Randy Savage. Those guys had a history from Memphis. And when he starts working the house shows, the occasional house show, it's against Randy Savage, and he would lose by count out when he would just walk out. This is a different era, of course. Wins and losses very much mattered. WrestleMania comes and goes though. I mean, he's with the company for WrestleMania 9, but he's not doing commentary on it. Instead, they debut Jim Ross and they go with Randy Savage and Bobby Heenan. It is interesting to think about the fact that WrestleMania 9 could have been the first time we saw JR and the King, but it wasn't to be. Do you remember it ever being discussed, him having anything to do at WrestleMania 9?
I don't, because at the time, as far as the commentary position, it was an opportunity for Vince not to be on commentary and be back producing WrestleMania, introduce JR, and who was JR going to have the most chemistry with? You kind of had Savage out there who was making that transition. So and Bobby, you knew, wouldn't disappoint. And I think that Vince looked at it as, I don't want it to be too Southern,
right,
with JR and King out there. And again, I go back, Lawler just doesn't sound Southern to me. And maybe that's just, again, in my head.
Let's talk a little bit about, what he's doing after this. His first major angle is probably the one you want to talk about here. It comes at the King of the Ring in 1993. After Bret Hart wins the tournament, he's doing an interview with Mean Gene Okerlund, and Lawler attacks him, beating him with a scepter and smashing his crown. And being that Jerry is billed as the king and Bret just won the King of the Ring tournament, I guess that's a natural fit. Whose idea was Bret and Jerry working together?
God, I want to say that was something that Pat and I had come up with, because it was a natural, and it was something that Lawler could really sink his teeth into. Bret had come off losing the championship at WrestleMania. Now he's going to be the King of the Ring. You wanted to give Bret, get him involved in something, another top story, and getting to the pay-per-view. Here was an opportunity to use Lawler. You got him on TV every week to sell it. And now it's going to be special to see him wrestle and to actually see him compete on a pay-per-view. So, and it was a way to get Bret over, because you beat Lawler every single night, and the next day he's going to come back and get his heat on television. That was the idea behind it. Bret wasn't really crazy about it, because Bret always wanted to work with a worker. Bret wanted to have that great match, and he didn't know if he could get that great match out of Lawler. He didn't consider Jerry this great technician that could do all these different things. And Jerry would talk people in, and awesome heel, absolutely awesome heel. So that was the idea behind it, getting to that point.
So not too long after, Lawler's doing a King's Court with Owen Hart, which would lead to a singles match between the two of them. And Lawler would win after knocking out Owen with a foreign object and then using a pile driver. On the July 19th Raw, Lawler would interview Tiny Tim, which is a throwback here. Lawler winds up breaking Tim's ukulele after Tim called him Dairy Queen. I don't know when we'll talk about Tiny Tim again, but I'm sure you've got a fun little Tiny Tim story or impression or something to entertain us.
Tiny Tim was, I guess, from the 60s, and he had his little ukulele and would sing "Tiptoe Through the Tulips with Me." It was a throwback, but Tim wanted, God, I think at some point he wanted to sing the national anthem somewhere along the way. His wife was his manager, and she took care of him. And Tim was very fragile, and he always wore like these, like Jay-Z flair, the suits he wears.
Yeah.
But these would be, like Snoopy and different things like that. And very unusual, and always filthy. They look like he had just walked through a construction site or something. Long fingernails with dirt under him, but he was a character. Very, very nice. So he wanted to come in. He wanted to do something with us. He wanted to sing the Star Spangled Banner. And Vince is like, what the fuck is that going to sound like?
Right.
So we were at the Manhattan Center. We figured, okay, we'll do something with him. And he loved it. It was like, how about if, way to get heat on Jerry Lawler is if everybody loves Tiny Tim. God damn it. He's tiny and he's Tim. It was a fun segment, but I'll be damned. It got play on like Entertainment Tonight and that type of shows. Tiny Tim back in the spotlight with wrestler Jerry Lawler. So it was good in the way that Lawler, working with celebrities, he likes to beat them up and humiliate them, but you couldn't touch Tim, so you touch his ukulele.
Wow. There's a fun Blue Chew spot there, but we don't have one this week, so we'll move on. The July 26th Raw, Bret is wrestling Bam Bam Bigelow, and this is being held at the Manhattan Center, and Bret's parents, Stu and Helen Hart, are there, and Lawler comes out and starts to insult both of them, and Bret winds up leaving the ring and going after Lawler. It's a pretty memorable angle because Lawler was, he can be pretty brutal when going after Bret's parents. Was Bret okay with it? Was Stu okay with it? How much of that are sending WWF guys down to wrestle Lawler? There's even a famous promo where Vince is wearing the USWA title belt. I mean, really, really early fun here. Is this almost like a dress rehearsal of sorts?
Yeah, it was Vince being the guy that he always wanted to be. Vince grew up idolizing Dr. Jerry Graham and always wanting to cut those heel promos. So it was an opportunity for him to cut the promo as himself. It was from one market in Memphis, Tennessee. Who the hell's going to see it? But it was a chance for Vince to have fun with it. And man, we just would finish up the Superstars voiceovers and Vince would go into the studio and Lawler would say, okay, we got this match coming up, and Vince would cut a bunch of promos. And Lawler had his next 3 to 4 weeks of promos from Vince in the can and play him each week in Memphis.
Talk to me. I mean, did any of the boys see it? Was anybody in the office saying, hey, let me see that? I mean, people had to be intrigued by what's he doing if they heard about it, right?
I don't know that many people knew about it. Wow. Unless you were in Memphis.
Right.
It wasn't that big of a deal. It was from Memphis, Tennessee, and to the rest of the world, it was Memphis, Tennessee. So it was a one town, one market getting these promos. It wasn't really going anywhere else.
Let's go to SummerSlam 93. It was scheduled to be Bret Hart versus Jerry Lawler, but then comes the highlight of the show. Lawler comes out on crutches to do the old broken leg trick, and he brings out Doink as his replacement. Doink throws a bucket of confetti on the ringside crowd and then throws a bucket of water on Bruce Hart, who's ringside with Owen Hart. And it's been said
afterwards, because we were all talking about it. It's just a little thing that not everybody's going to pick up on.
Right.
And afterwards it was like, good God, did you see that fucking Lawler? And Vince go, God damn, it was great. One finger. And that was all he needed to get all of his heat back. Got his ass kicked. He's going out on a stretcher, but he's got one finger. I beat you, Bret. I beat you. And it's a sign of a great heel.
Very well done. If you haven't seen this, I encourage you to go watch it. Meltzer gave it 4 stars. SummerSlam 93. The whole segment, start to finish, is worth done. Is worth watching. Meltzer even wrote the whole scenario from start to finish was worth 4 stars. So he really dug it. This sets up a feud, of course, between Lawler and Doink, because Lawler is blaming Doink for losing to Bret at SummerSlam, which in effect turns Doink babyface in the process. The interesting thing about this whole Vince in Memphis idea is they have a match on October 11th with Jerry Lawler taking on Randy Savage, and Vince McMahon is Randy Savage's manager. They only drew 850 fans for like a $5,000 gate. Is that more of a testament to that Memphis fans weren't really WWF fans, or was just the business that bad at the time?
Combination, a little bit of both. I don't know that the angle became an angle with Vince and Lawler, and people knew that they were never going to get the payoff with Vince and Lawler in a match of any kind. So it was constantly one of Vince's guys. However, putting Randy Savage in there, it should have done a lot better than it did at 850 people. I just think it was a testament to the business overall at the time was down, and the all-night gas station opened up down the street that night too. So excuse is an excuse. They just didn't want to see that attraction.
I love when you go to that, the all-night gas station. Well, listen, this is going to be uncomfortable. We've touched on this before, but we've got to do it again here. This was touched on most recently in our Survivor Series 93 episode when we had that big anniversary, 25 years, late last year. But Meltzer is going to report that Jerry's found himself facing a little bit of trouble. He would write, Jerry Lawler, longtime co-owner of the USWA and one of the most enduring regional headliners in the history of pro wrestling, was indicted on November 12th on 1 count of second-degree rape, 3 counts of second-degree sodomy, and 1 count of harassing a witness. Lawler, who's scheduled to be arraigned on November 22nd, was charged by a Jefferson County, Kentucky grand jury of the 5 counts in reference to an alleged encounter with a 13-year-old girl in Louisville. He is also being investigated for criminal allegations in southern Indiana on what are allegedly similar circumstances. Lawler was 43 at the time. The World Wrestling Federation, faced with its own image problem over many printed allegations of sexually deviant behavior among 2 former employees, a steroid scandal, and a nearly 2-year-long Justice Department investigation, which went public in New York mainstream media, along with a front page Newsday story less than 2 weeks earlier, immediately suspended Lawler without pay upon receiving word Friday of the indictment, even though he was without question the company's hottest heel. His match on the Survivor Series pay-per-view, where his team with 3 unknown masked knights against Bret, Owen, Keith, and Bruce Hart, was considered by most the top drawing match on the show, even though it was positioned as second from the top by the company. Company officials announced the next evening on the WWF radio show that Lawler had been indicted on 5 charges in Louisville and put on immediate hiatus pending clearing up of his legal situation. So we know the story is going to be, they replace Shawn Michaels. They call on Rio Rogers to replace Lawler on TV commentary, and Shawn Michaels takes Lawler's spot in the match. Talk to me about how you hear the news and how you guys arrived at what about Rio and what about Shawn?
I think that the news came to us for the first time in Lowell, Massachusetts. A lot of shit happened in Lowell. That was the first time that I remember hearing about it. And I remember Jerry Jarrett being the one to tell us what happened. Then we talked to Jerry, and Jerry gave his side of the story, and Vince explained to him that, unfortunately in today's society, you're guilty till you're proven innocent. We had to make a move and just let him know that we're going to suspend you and we have to make that public. However, you come out on the other side of this and there's, no truth to this, then we'll definitely bring you back. But you have to go through the process of defending yourself. And from a company standpoint, just couldn't have that stink on us. And we had to do something. And it was the right thing to do based on the information that everyone had at the time.
It's worth mentioning, of course, that this gives birth to Rio Rogers. I know we've touched on it before, but we still get questions about it. Tell everybody how the hell this came to be.
You guys listen to me do caricatures on here. And one of the things, it's natural speak for me. I break into Dusty Rhodes if the situation calls for it, no matter where I am or who the hell I'm talking to. Just kind of go on into a little bit like this. How you doing, darling? You're looking awful fine today. And I did that all the time when we would be writing television, booking meetings, whatever. Yeah, baby, I don't know if this is going to work for me tonight. Jerry Jarrett was fascinated by my Dusty Rhodes caricature. So Jerry was, Bruce, you need to do that as a character. I said, no, I don't. It's Dusty. There's already a Dusty. Okay. I'm not Dusty. I just, he convinced Vince that this is the most entertaining character in the world. And we've got to have Bruce as this character. And Vince, I love it. Come up with a name. And we talked about Roy Rogers, and I said, and I made the mistake of saying, Rogers is my middle name. I love it, but we can't do Roy. And I forget who the hell it was came up with Rio Rogers, and I was stuck with it. And I said, Vince, I can't do it as me, and it's the shits because it's Dusty, And so I took everything the opposite of what Dusty was. Instead of cowboy hat, I'd wear a baseball cap backwards. I had the one bull riding glove because, you always got to have one glove, baby. It's kind of like Michael Jackson, but it's got a little flair to it over here a little bit because I, ride them bulls. The best part of it was the chaps that I wore were actually Dusty's chaps that Dusty stole from Terry Funk.
That's a lot to follow there.
Yeah. And I got all this shit from a tack shop in Westport, Connecticut. So it was all this upscale cowboy shit, completely opposite of the common man. So we thought that was the idea. And I'd go out and do this character, which is hard to sustain. Again, going back to what I hated to do, color commentary. God damn it, it's not you, Bruce. It's Rio. So you could just do the entertaining shit and get in and out. I was like, but somebody else doing Dusty for an hour is tiresome,
right?
At best. We did it for a couple weeks and got like, oh my God, stop the pain. And I believe that's what everybody in production was saying too. Every time we would do a show was, please stop the pain. It was brutal and it sucked. And thank God I only did, I think a handful of Rio Rogers appearances in the whole time, and got to kill it because it absolutely positively sucked.
Well, people still ask about it. So it's something, I guess. I guess we should mention that Lawler, all of this stuff eventually goes away. And that's not what people talk about, that ultimately it goes away. But he's accused at different times of tampering with witnesses and threatening girls and trying to humiliate them and embarrass them. To the point that he even makes an appearance on a television show and says this was a situation where a couple of young wrestling groupies were bragging about some supposed sexual conquests to some friends of theirs. And it snowballed and it was related from one person to another. And my name was dropped in, among other names, as having been with these girls. Each and every one of these allegations are false. They'll be proven false if need be in a court of law. And this is a case of a couple of girls who are wrestling groupies who told another party about a supposed sexual conquest. And this party went to authorities. The authorities came to me. I volunteered to tell my side of the story to a grand jury. But when I was in front of the grand jury, I didn't get to tell my side of the story and what I know about the situation. In the end though, although this looks bad and it feels bad, he's acquitted of all of this stuff. And I mean, he was looking at major prison time, so it had to be something you guys were talking about. And I know people still to this day talk about it. I know it's probably a sore spot for Jerry, but what doesn't get talked about enough, because it is just sort of the thing to do, you just bust balls. It's a complete dismissal. Lawler pled not guilty. He was, made free. He got out on $1,000 bond. And then eventually when it, all shook out, nothing came of it. What do you remember the mood and tenor of the conversation with Vince being about all this? Because the timing of this could not fucking be worse. Could it not?
Not really. No. I mean, I don't think there's ever any good timing for that kind of an accusation. However, you've got Vince, who just came off similar accusations, different, wasn't sexual allegations or anything like that. However, he was accused of something that he didn't do and acquitted. The media and so-called journalists, they'll spend a half hour telling you all of the horrible, nasty, vulgar details of the accusations and paint you as the worst person in the world, and spend 15 seconds. He was acquitted on all charges and everything was dismissed. But can you believe what they said he did? And then they'll repeat all that. So if you miss that snippet, that 10-second snippet of he was dismissed and acquitted of all charges, in your mind, he's guilty till proven innocent. And that's what is sad about the way that journalism and the media portray every story nowadays, it feels like. So that's the way it was being portrayed, and you got to give people the benefit of the doubt. I don't think that there were a lot of people in his own camp in Memphis that he had his supporters, but he also had his detractors and people that would say, that motherfucker's going to get exactly what he deserves. Fuck him. And he's probably guilty anyway. That doesn't help his case either. Yeah. So it was, you have to go into these things with an open mind. You really do. And realize there's another side to the story, and what the journalists of the world and the media tell you all the time is not always the facts.
This is directly from the Observer. The mother,
speaking of, yeah, go ahead.
The mother admitted to Lawler that her daughter doesn't always tell the truth. The alleged victim claims she made up the story in frustration when accused of messing around with wrestlers. Quote, I told the detectives that what I had already told John. I told them that on the morning of May 26, 1993, a friend of mine and I met Jerry Lawler at Louisville Gardens and went with him to the Days Inn in Sellersburg, Indiana. And I told them that both the friend and I performed oral sex on Jerry Lawler. I was not telling the truth. I was afraid, and the police detectives told me they wanted me to tell them what I had told John. That's why I said this, and I know what I did was wrong. We did go over to Jerry Lawler's room, though, and he did take us out to eat at Taco Bell, shopping at Value City, and then back to the Louisville Gardens. The girl also admitted to repeating to the detectives about similar incidents with Lawler on June 6th and July 7th, where she said that involved her, but not her friend. She said Lawler had treated her as a friend for several years and had always been nice to her and her mother. And the girl said that she was sorry she said those things. So I know a lot of this sounds weird, but apparently this girl was just a big wrestling fan, and she even sold pictures for Lawler at his gimmick table. And this is much ado about nothing. Meltzer would write, the much publicized criminal case against Jerry Lawler in Jefferson County, Kentucky was settled on February 23rd in a deal reached between two sides at a pretrial hearing where Lawler agreed to plead guilty to harassing a witness. And in return, the prosecutors dropped the 4 counts of statutory rape and sodomy against him. The plea bargain arrangement agreed to by Lawler in order to end the 4-month ordeal was made when Lawler and his lawyers, Bill Massey of Memphis and Tim Dennison of Louisville, were assured that he wouldn't have to serve any prison time if he pled guilty to the misdemeanor charge. And then in return, all 4 felony counts against him would be dropped. The judge gave Lawler a 12-month suspended sentence, no fine, and 2 years of unsupervised probation for the guilty plea. If Lawler were to violate any laws during their probation period, he'd have to serve the prison sentence that was now suspended. And if he didn't violate any laws over the next 5 years, the conviction would be expunged from his record, which it now has been. So I hate that we even bring this up because I know it's a sore spot for Lawler, but in the end, it all went away. It was expunged. And the only thing he had to, sort of cop to was harassing a witness. But it is a black mark on not just Lawler, but Memphis wrestling as a whole. Because fair or not, Memphis gets painted with that brush a lot now, right?
Yeah, I think they do. And it was, again, a different time and a different era. And I don't know if it was something of rumor and innuendo, but again, fair or not, yeah, it's definitely still out there. And people, they hear those stories and they automatically are going to paint everyone associated with it with the same brush.
One of the things that I think, Lawler has maybe alleged over the years, or theorized rather, is that this type of thing gets political. But whenever there's somebody who has a big name like this and is a bit of a celebrity, has some sort of charge against them, whoever is prosecuting them, and especially if they're trying to become an elected official, they can really make a name for themselves by sort of attaching themselves to a celebrity, especially if that celebrity is found guilty. Did you guys think, commonly, I guess that the phrase for that is a witch hunt? Did you guys think at some point, as some of these details started to come out, that, hey, this is just a witch hunt. There's no smoke to this fire?
A little bit. Yeah. There was a feeling of a vendetta maybe against Jerry for whatever reason, that someone had it in for him locally, that, as you said, they wanted to make a name for themselves. So that was without a doubt a consideration along the way. And in the end, everything got dropped.
It's so crazy that, this is, something that really puts the brakes on momentum for a major show like Survivor Series 93, which is available in the archives. But it also feels like, hey, this could be, because as you said, they're real quick to just give a real quick update. They'll spend months dragging it out and it's headlines every day, but then when it's over, it gets that amount of coverage. Meltzer would write, Lawler had been assured all along that he could return to the World Wrestling Federation, where he was arguably the hottest heel at the time of the indictment when his legal charges were cleared up. There's already been speculation he'll return as a surprise at WrestleMania and likely in a role of manager for Owen Hart. Lawler said on Wednesday morning that no deal had been worked out regarding returning, and even before the settlement, he expressed some reservations about the extensive travel schedule and philosophically stated about working in the WWF that something that maybe just wasn't meant to be. As this drags on for not 1 month, not 2 months, but 3 and 4, did you guys start to wonder, is this ever going to get cleared up, or is the brand damaged, or have we lost all our momentum, or was it always, as far as you knew, the plan to bring him back?
You had a plan A and you had a plan B. You had to wait and see where all this landed. So you hoped that he would be able to come back and we'll find something for him, whether it's in his old position or not. At the same time, you have to conduct your business. Your business doesn't stop. You've got to keep moving forward, and you have to move forward as if he's not there, because at the time he's just not, and you can't make business decisions on what ifs. So you had to just kind of move forward. He's not here with us. Hopefully he'll get all this worked out and we'll maybe return him to his old role. Maybe we'll find another role for him.
So Jerry's off TV. He comes back at WrestleMania 10. And then a few months later, we see Lawler and Piper start another angle together, and Jerry's been making fun of Roddy on TV. And then he brings a skinny kid to the ring dressed as Roddy. Jerry insults him and even had him kiss his feet. It's pretty fun. Meltzer would write, the guy who did the Piper act that airs this coming weekend on Raw was contacted by Titan after doing a Piper imitation when sending in a video for WWF Mania. He was paid $1,000 for the gig and worked out the act with Jerry Lawler. And they talked about bringing him to King of the Ring to work with Lawler again, but that wasn't promised. Is this like a fan's dream right here or what?
Absolutely. It was impressive, but it was also going back to some of the things that Lawler had done with Stu and Helen and just kind of Lawler's MO as a heel. Pat and I had seen this guy. He kind of half-assed looked like Roddy in many ways, but at this time we didn't have a full-time Roddy Piper, and Roddy was sending in these videos that he was producing himself, and he had a camera with him all the time, and he would just cut these promos. Sometimes they went on forever, and that was the deal that Vince had made. And it was also you would think you have two of the best talkers in the business in Roddy Piper and Jerry Lawler. However, Roddy wasn't privy or for whatever reason didn't listen to a lot of the things Lawler was coming up with, and you ended up having to get Jerry to go back and try to adapt his stuff to what Lawler was. I mean, what Piper was saying, which a lot of times made no sense at all. It was great on paper until you actually get into the execution. And I thought that no matter what the match was, nobody thought the match was going to be great. However, I did think that the build up for it would be some of the best shit ever. And it was disappointing. I mean, it was disappointing. And we had booked it. We were there. We had Roddy. Not one of the bright spots.
King of the Ring 94, Baltimore. They go 12 minutes and 30 seconds. Roddy gets the win. Meltzer would write, Piper got a huge reaction coming out to a major bagpipe festival ring entrance, but the match lacked heat once it got going. There was enough good wrestling underneath that these guys relying on no wrestling moves couldn't get the job done. Yeah, I think Meltzer's even being kind here when he gives it 1 star. He would write, after below par brawling and little wrestling came the ref bump. Lawler pulled out a foreign object and hit Piper, tried to pin him with his feet on the ropes, but the kid threw Lawler's feet off the ropes. Lawler goes after the kid. Piper got him from behind with a sloppy bridging back suplex. That was the idea, although the reality was something different. For the pin, 1 star.
I'll never forget Roddy coming backstage. And he looked at me and he says, how was it? I could tell by the look on my face that I didn't like it. And I remember we went in his dressing room and he says, no, come on, man, tell me. I said, Roddy, it was fucking awful. We should have gone about half the time and let you guys beat the shit out of each other and just get the hell out of there. But I don't understand why the hell you tried to wrestle him. And then it was nonsense. It wasn't good. And then I left the room, came back a little while later, and now Roddy was half-ass hot at me. He goes, oh yeah, God damn, you guys give me something, and then I didn't even I didn't have time to prepare. And I was like, Roddy, fuck. We gave you all the time in the world, and it's our fault. Yeah, I'm gonna say it's my fault. It was 100% my fault. Because I let Roddy go do his own stuff. I let him, I had that faith. I had that faith that Roddy would deliver. And if he didn't deliver in the form that we wanted, that we could edit his stuff in sound bites to make it interesting. And we just didn't have a lot of interesting stuff to make it interesting. And the only thing that we had that we could control at that point was Lawler. And he did the best he could, but it was oil and hot sauce. Didn't work.
Yeah. We talked about something that was great. Well, this was not that. King of the Ring here, 94. After this, Sherry works a very short program with Duke the Dumpster Drose. I don't know when we'll talk about him again, but he's experiencing a little bit of a resurgence. He started to pop up on some cons and conventions. You got any good dumpster stories you can share with us?
I always liked Duke the Dumpster Drose. Big guy, and it just, for whatever reason, never clicked with the audience. And Vince felt that he had personality. He could command the hell out of a dressing room telling stories. Great storyteller. Just everybody loved him. Never clicked with the audience for whatever reason. And you try and you figure, okay, this is a good way to introduce him. We'll get beyond the gimmick and have some fun with it. But it never worked. And it wasn't for lack of trying, but it just, it just did not work. Good guy. And I think because he was a good guy that Vince continued to try to come up with something for him. And it just never worked and you never got there with it.
Well, there you go. Let's talk a little bit about what's next here. On the September 26th Raw, we see the revival of that Lawler Doink feud. And Jerry introduces a little person named Little Louie, who's dressed up like Lawler, and gave him the name Queasy. What do you remember about Queasy, Sleazy, and Cheesy? Because they were all debuted October 17th on Raw. I can't believe this is real life.
Well, I think we're getting to the Survivor Series at that point. It was a way to have the King's Court. So he had his, instead of Dopey and Doc and everybody, he had his, Queasy, Sleazy, and Cheesy. Or his King's Court. A little levity. It was some entertaining shit. I enjoyed the hell out of it. The issue at that time was on the other side, the side you would think would be a little more entertaining was Doink. It was no longer Matt Bourne, and they didn't have the same, I think that originally when we had Matt with Lawler, and that's when Matt had his issues and left, you had Ray on the other side portraying Doink, and there wasn't the chemistry there with Lawler at all. And I think that the more entertaining little people were on the side of Lawler. Even though we had Dink. Dink was good. Dink was Tiger Jackson. He was a hell of an entertainer, but it's a novelty. And if you do it too much, it's no longer a novelty. And we were doing it every week. So I think the audience kind of got tired of it pretty quick.
Is this a Vince call? Does Vince have a fascination with little wrestlers?
It was really, Pat had a fascination with Tiger Jackson, and Pat was all, old school, me too, of back in the day, you'd have your cards and they would be in the local newspaper, and you would have your main event, your semi-main event. And then there would be a little box at the bottom, plus midgets and the girls.
Yeah.
And that's how the female wrestlers were billed. And that's how the little people were billed. That was a special attraction. And Pat always loved the little people, and he was trying to do something for Tiger Jackson. And we had, I forget which one of the heels that was the better worker. And it was a way to try and get this attraction of Dink and whichever King, edition that we had. And it just kind of fizzled out after a while to where no one wanted to see it. Nobody cared.
Well, let's talk about Survivor Series 94. You mentioned it. November 26th, San Antonio. It's the Royal Family. They're going to beat Clowns R Us. Is that your favorite team name ever?
Hell yes. That's where you find them.
Well, the Royal Family gets the win. Well, sort of right. It was all comedy, but that's using the term comedy very loosely. -2.5 stars. What did you think of the match?
It was horrible, but it was a little people match. It was meant to be haha. It was meant to be levity and give people a break from all the other bullshit going on the card.
The next big match Jerry's in is in May, the first In Your House pay-per-view. It's against Bret Hart. It only gets 1.5 stars. It goes down in Syracuse, New York. Lawler gets the win in 5 minutes and 9 seconds. What's interesting about this though, is the ref gets his foot tangled in the ropes and he's hanging upside down. This happens after Shinja came to ringside. So Hakushi does a run in, comes off the top rope 3 times on Bret Hart. And, the referee of course recovers, counts the fall. And then after the match, Lawler holds Bret Hart and Hakushi charges towards him, but Hart ducks. So Hakushi ducks Lawler. Bret then gives chase after Hakushi, but of course he finally just catches Shinja, gets a few blows in there.
That's a bullshit. I'm not going to tell a JJ.
Lawler had promised in this match he was going to bring his mother to ringside. Of course, he's been insulting Bret Hart's mother, but a woman shows up who's probably not going to have to be his daughter. Who was playing the mother here?
I have absolutely no idea. We actually got her at Mothers R Us.
No, there you go. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What'd you think of this match and the debut of Hakushi? We'll probably never do a full show on him.
Man, I was a big fan of Hakushi, and I think that Bret always was looking for, and we looked at it the same way. So it wasn't just Bret, but Bret was always looking to be Hulk Hogan in Bret Hart's way. Because when Bret became champion, we would ask the question, what would you do if it was Hulk?
Right.
So Bret felt that anybody that we were bringing in, that Bret was the Dragon Slayer and Bret was the Monster Beater, and that he just beat everybody and should never show weakness. So Hakushi was doomed before he came in because we wanted Hakushi to come in and be a star. He had a unique look, great worker. Unfortunately, it's hard to connect with someone who doesn't understand the language and can't communicate. His manager, wasn't a great communicator either. It wasn't that heat-seeking promo. It was slow and it was methodical and very stereotypical that you couldn't get a whole lot. But Hakushi was brought in to be a star. Hakushi was brought in to work with Bret and actually work with Undertaker. But when he came in sight unseen. When I say sight unseen, JJ had seen him in Japan and we had seen pictures and we had seen video. However, when you saw him in person, he wasn't as big as he appeared in a lot of the videos. But without a doubt, an excellent worker and a great gimmick that I still think that, God, he would flourish today working the style of shit that he did. And just at that time, they considered him small, and he wasn't small.
Right.
He's a decent sized guy, but in the world of you going up against Undertaker and these big guys, he was small.
Well, let's talk about the next big match that Lawler's got. It's going to be leading to the Kiss My Foot match at King of the Ring. And on the way here, we get a Superstars on June 6th, where Jerry Lawler pins Aldo Montoya with a pile driver and then takes his boot off and rubs it in Aldo's face and mouth. Ugh. What do you think old Just Incredible thought about having the King's foot in his mouth?
Honored, because it was Jerry Lawler who came to us and said, you need to see this kid, PJ Polacco or whatever the hell name he was going by at the time.
Probably PJ Walker.
What is it?
Probably PJ Walker at the time.
Yeah, PJ Walker. He goes, he looks just like Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, Vince is talking to him, finds out he's Portuguese. God damn it, I love it. And Aldo Montoya was born.
Well, there you go. So the promos he did on the way here for this are great. We're seeing him walking through horse stalls and stables, walking through what looks like authentic horse manure. And he's squishing his feet around and saying, I want my feet to be rancid when we wrestle this match. I'm not going to wash my feet. There's going to be calluses, corns, every kind of foot rot there is. That's what you deserve to kiss. This feels like a Bruce Prichard shoot. Did you shoot this vignette?
I did, in medieval times in New Jersey. And Lawler and I had an absolute blast. We had our run of the place. They had all of the knights and wenches and everything there for us and gave us whatever it is that we wanted. And we just went through. We probably had about 4 hours to shoot in there and access to everything. It was some of the most fun I've ever had, but we did everything. And I had done a Kiss My Foot match in Global with Eddie Gilbert. So I was like, that's what the King does. The King makes people kiss his feet.
Right.
So it's logical for Lawler to want everybody to kiss his feet, especially Bret Hart. And that's kind of where the idea came from. And Lawler took it to a whole new level. And then Vince was like, I love it. He won't wash for a month. And it just kept getting better and better.
It's outstanding, man. Let's talk about the actual match itself. It's King of the Ring 1995. It's a Kiss My Foot match. We're 2 years after Bret and Jerry had their incident at King of the Ring 93. I guess the the first time they did something like this, according to the Observer, was May 12th in Providence, Rhode Island. And that's probably where you guys tried to work out how you would do it and what the finish would be, et cetera, et cetera. The match is pretty good. Meltzer gave it 2 3/4 stars. Afterwards, of course, Hakushi and Shinja show up again. Hakushi goes for a springboard shoulder block, who moves again and hits Lawler. With Lawler knocked out from the move, Hart knocks Hakushi out of the ring and shoves his foot in Lawler's face. And then he twists Lawler's own foot and puts Lawler's own foot in his face, which is pretty awesome because Lawler's selling it like he's going to throw up, which he does later in the show. And Meltzer would say, not a good match technically, but Hart was the most over person on the show, and Lawler did a great job working the crowd. So the match had by far the most crowd heat and interest. I mean, I know that, you know, maybe people rate matches a different way, and this was only 9 minutes and 20 seconds, but the crowd loved it. This was a fun match. I enjoyed it.
They did love it because it was an old school heel. And this was one of those cases that I think that Jerry, playing that old school, he got old time heat, man. He took his time with it, and it was a very simple match and very easy story to understand. I'm going to beat you. You're going to kiss my feet. And then in the end, Bret reversing it all and shoving Lawler's own foot down his throat. We all were sitting there going, oh my God, how's he going to, he's not going to get it in there. And then he actually did. And Bret was going to get that foot in Lawler's mouth one way or another. And the audience is happy. They got their payoff that they paid to see.
Lawler wrote, I went to the back and they sent word back that Vince loved it. He wanted me to go to the bathroom. They were going to do an interview with Bret, and then they wanted to get a shot of me about to be sick. I always wanted to go a bit further, so I jammed a load of crackers into my mouth and drank a big slug of Coke. All I was supposed to do was look like I was going to be sick. They said they were coming to me, 3, 2, 1, and I blah all over the mirror and everywhere, and it looked extremely realistic. They all thought I really vomited on live TV, which is kind of fun. And they're going to use this as a way to bring in Isaac Yankem, DDS, because Jerry had to go see him because of all the damage done from having to kiss his own foot. Can't believe this is real life.
Well, where do you go after your disgusting foot is shoved down your throat?
Well, you know, it's funny because my kid just went to the dentist. She's going to get braces, and I had to ask her what she thought of her dentist's name was Yankem. And she said, oh God, that's so corny, Dad. Where do you come up with that? And I said, well,
I yank 'em, Dr. I yank 'em.
Anyway, when I told her that used to be Kane's character on TV, it was a mind melt for a 14-year-old. Of course we know him as the mayor. He's Kane. But he was in Memphis as the Unabomber, and he was even once the Christmas creature. Is Lawler the one putting in a good word for this monster that's going to become Kane?
We had our eye on him, and, you know, we had been going back and forth with him. Bobby Heenan always told the same joke, you know, oh, you got to go to the dentist. I yank him. Vince was then, God damn, we got to have a character. Dr. Isaac Yankem. I yank him. God damn, that's a good one. And Glenn was there, looked at him, said he could be a mean. Would you be scared going into the dentist and see that big bastard staring back at you? And of course made his rotten teeth. So yeah, Lawler was a big proponent of Glenn's. Because he had the size and he had worked with him before, and nobody had anything bad to say about Glenn Jacobs.
Well, they wrestle. Bret and Yankem wrestle at SummerSlam 95. Jerry is in Isaac's corner. The finish would see Lawler and Yankem tie Hart's throat up in the ropes and double on him until they got a DQ. The officials come in, and Hart is selling the choke for several minutes before leaving the ring. And it's weird to believe, but that's actually Kane's first pay-per-view match in the company. What'd you think?
I think, thank God for Bret Hart and Jerry Lawler, because they disguised everything. Glenn was very green at the time and didn't, you know, he probably really didn't belong in that spot, but you had Lawler and Bret to kind of get him through it. So made a passable. It wasn't great. It wasn't something to write home and go, oh my God, did you see Bret Hart and Isaac Yankem? It was good.
So Bret and Yankem have a rematch on Raw, and Lawler suspended in a cage over the ring. And after a while into the match, he kept saying he was scared of heights and his nose starts to bleed. And Lawler would explain in his book that he had a deviated septum and he had no idea exactly what punch to the nose did it, but he'd never even had a broken nose. But for whatever reason, one nasal passage was much narrower than the other. And if he ever had trouble breathing, he'd use a nasal spray, but whenever that stuff wore off, you'd have to open that passage back up again. You'd get a scab on the inside, and sometimes it would feel like it was closing up, and he would have a big nosebleed. So he's screaming to Vince, "Don't raise me up. I'm scared of heights." And he reaches up and pulls the scab out and starts to bleed. I mean, what an old pro fucking Lawler is to even think of that, right?
Absolutely. I thought it was ingenious because we're watching it and we didn't know he was going to do that. I had no clue, but it was part of you is thinking, did he take something up there to,
right?
Like, is he squirting blood up his nose and it's running down like that? But it was ingenious because I'm afraid of heights. And when some people get too high up, their nose bleeds.
Something else Lawler did that was pretty innovative, not just that blood spot, but he would wrestle enhancement talent. And a lot of times he would do it with a microphone in the ring with him. So he'd do commentary on his own match. That's like fucking genius. Is that his idea? Talk me through that. I love it.
That was Vince's idea as a way to get Jerry to do color commentary. And why wouldn't he do it on his own match? God damn. And Lawler had a hard time with it at first because it's kind of awkward to try and have a match and do commentary through the whole thing and find ways to get your opponent down and what the hell are you going to do? So in the very beginning, it was tough, but he got the flow of it after a while. But that was something that Vince just loved to hear him do his own commentary on his own match on TV.
Somewhere in here, they start to make some announcer changes, and Doc Hendricks comes in and actually replaces Jerry Lawler. And then Jerry moves over to Superstars. What's the rationale and more Michael Hayes, less Jerry Lawler?
No, we were just looking for change it up, shake it up some. New seasons, new times. They often just shake it up. And I had really tried to get Michael in for a long time and would get the same answer, no, God damn that. Look at him. So we finally made it happen. And there was, I forget what the hell was going on, but we just needed that void and we needed him quick. So Michael came in and just like Lawler, he hit it off with Vince right away and they had chemistry going back and forth. And I always thought that I think Michael's one of the best play-by-play guys or color guys in the business for a heel.
Wow. How about that? Glowing review there. Let's talk about that Survivor Series. This is something that we've never spent a lot of time on. Survivor Series 1995. And it's an interesting time in the company because you've got Undertaker, Fatu, Henry Godwin, and Savio Vega taking on Jerry Lawler, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, King Mabel, and Isaac Yankem. They go 14 minutes and 21 seconds. What did you think of the match? Meltzer would say not much for wrestling, but the booking was good. He gave it a star and a half.
God, you look at that lineup. Undertaker, Fatu, later be Rikishi, Henry Godwin, and Savio Vega against Lawler, Triple H, King Mabel, and Isaac Yankem, later to be Kane. It was god awful, but a lot of, especially at this time, there was a lot of star power. And in my opinion, it was just fucking thrown together. And yeah, there was, you had Triple H and Godwin kind of adversarial, and it just was, here's a match. Here's, whatever, 4 guys against 4 guys. Not a lot of thought to it, really and truly.
Well, I mean, the match was fun for what it was, especially if you grew up that time. I was not a fan of it, but we've gotten lots of requests to cover that show. And Well, that's a shame. Meltzer reported in early January, Lawler has suffered a broken fibula in a match on November 27th with Brad Armstrong in Memphis. The doctor felt it wasn't all that serious and he'd be back in action after the first of the year. Any heat with Vince when a guy gets hurt working outside the company like this? I mean, I know he had a separate deal with Jerry, but any pushback at all?
Well, yeah, it sucks.
Sure.
You know, it's one thing for a guy to get injured and that sucks, but when they're doing it in someone else's time and in someone else's ring, it's not good. It's not a good look for anybody at any time. And Jerry getting hurt on his time, just, yeah, not smart on his part, especially getting hurt in Memphis, for fuck's sake. Who gets hurt in Memphis?
The April 1st, 1996 Raw, Jerry gets a world title match when he challenges Shawn Michaels. Of course, Shawn wins with a super kick, fresh off his win at WrestleMania 12. The next time we see a big feud with Jerry Lawler, it's with the Ultimate Warrior. On June 10th, Warrior is wrestling Goldust in a King of the Ring qualifying match, and they end up doing a double count out, but Lawler gets in Warrior's way when he's trying to get back in, and it stopped him from beating the count. So Warrior blames Lawler for him being counted out, and Lawler presents Warrior with an oil painting as a present. And you know where that winds up. Meltzer would write, I had a short-lived feud with the Ultimate Warrior. Some company in California had just released an Ultimate Warrior comic book. This was right down my alley. I'd always wanted to be a comic book artist, so I knocked the artwork in his comic book. I did a really nice portrait of the Ultimate Warrior, had it framed and everything to prove that he should have come to me, the best artist there was. Eventually, he called me out to the ring and I was going to bury the hatchet by giving him the portrait. He knocked me and wouldn't accept the gift. And as he turned to leave, I busted the portrait over his head. Problem was, the big, tough Ultimate Warrior was scared of the glass breaking over his head. He was afraid he might get cut. I told him I was just going to hit him with the back side of the picture, not the glass. It would just be a piece of cardboard. The glass will break out away from him. I assured him I'd done it several times on Memphis TV and no one had ever been cut. So we're going out live on TV on Raw and I'm standing there with the picture and here comes the Ultimate Warrior out to the ring and he's wearing a freaking baseball cap. He looks so stupid with his hair under the cap. It didn't even really look like him. Never once had anyone seen the Ultimate Warrior wearing a baseball cap. It was an instant angle alert. You could tell something was coming that involved him getting hit on the head. As far as I was concerned, that killed our angle. What say you, Bruce?
Yep, sure did.
Why didn't you stop him?
Okay. Hey, don't do that. Out the curtain. No one knew. No one knew.
He just did it on his own.
Did it on his own.
What did Vince think?
Furious.
Yeah.
It's like, why would, you're the Ultimate Warrior. Why would you wear a hat? I want to protect my eyes. I don't know him. Talking about Lawler. It's like, Jerry's not going to hurt you. But yeah, no one knew. He's standing there and music hits, puts the hat on and goes.
Wow.
What are you going to do?
Right.
Oh, run behind him, snatch the hat off his head.
Let's get to King of the Ring 96. Lawler gets pinned in 3 minutes and 50 seconds after what Meltzer says are some pathetic clotheslines and a shoulder block. Lawler did a great comedy monologue, insulting individual fans as he came to the ring. The jokes were all older than Lawler himself, and they're the same lines he's been delivering for 15 years, but he did a great job of getting the crowd going. Lawler jumped Warrior during his pre-match routine and kept on him until hitting a pile driver, which Warrior did the no sell on and went right to the finish. Dud. How thankful was Lawler to have this shit over with?
Very. We all were. There wasn't, when Warrior and Sting broke in, the first territory that they ever went to was Memphis.
Right.
I think Jerry felt he could get something out of the Warrior, but Warrior really didn't feel that Lawler was his caliber and really thought that he was head and shoulders above Jerry as far as stature and everything. And Vince thought that the same thing Lawler did. Jerry will be able to get something out of him. We'll get through this. So it was a meshing of styles, meshing of personalities. And once you're into it and you think, okay, the angle didn't work, the match sucks, just tap out, move on.
It is, not his best stuff, but the next thing he did, I really enjoyed. Jerry starts a feud with Jake Roberts, and Jerry is insulting him huge on commentary. And as a frame of reference, Roberts is back here doing promos on TV, admitting that he's had struggles with addiction, but now he's on a bit of a redemption tour, and even his snake is called Revelations. So he's born again and now clean and sober, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some great lines that come out of this. Like, when most people get drunk, they see snakes, but when snakes get drunk, they see Jake. Vince called Jake from Atlanta and asked if there was a drinking contest in the Olympics. His favorite drink is the next one. He thinks Beethoven's Fifth is a bottle. Unlike Clinton, Jake always inhaled. Every time he walks by a liquor store, his nose lights up. The only reason he doesn't drink and drive is because he's afraid he might hit a bump and spill his drink. Jake's two best friends are Jim Beam and Jack Daniels. Super simple, easy, but fun and effective, especially with the match they had at SummerSlam 96 in Cleveland. It's a Lawler comedy show here, and they pull out all the tricks. Meltzer hated it and gave it a dud, but I thought it had a lot of heat and it was super fun. And Lawler actually gets the win. And afterwards poured what was supposed to have been a bottle of whiskey down Jake's throat and all over his face. He tried to do it a second time, and the new signee, Mr. Mark Henry, stops him. Pretty fun stuff. What'd you think?
I thought it was great. And it was two old pros showing you why, if you know how to work and tell a story, that even if the match isn't, bumping and flying all over the place, that the audience will still get into it and they'll care. And that was what Jerry made people care for Jake, and Jake's promos made you believe. So it was, to me, a demonstration of the artwork that wrestling is a lot of times.
I thought it was really, really good. And if you haven't seen it, you should go out of your way to see it. I enjoyed that SummerSlam 96 show. And I know Meltzer didn't like that match, but I did. And it sets up a match for Mark Henry. And I guess if we're looking for a first opponent for a very green, brand new to the business, Mark Henry, who better than Jerry Lawler? And that's the plan at In Your House Mind Games on September 22nd, 96. And Mark gets the win by submission with a backbreaker over the shoulder. It gets a dud rating, but still it's a nice little showing for his first match like this. It's not the Mark Henry that we all know and love. Meltzer would even say at this point, Henry seems a lot closer to Bill Kazmaier than Ken Patera. After the match, Leif Cassidy, Marty Jannetty, and Hunter Hearst Helmsley all jump Henry, and he cleaned house on all of them, ending by pressing Helmsley and throwing him over the top rope on both rockers. Quote, Henry showed nothing. Dud. What'd you think?
Poor Jerry. Jerry was put in the position, but he did everything that he could. He knew how to work with the big green strongman and did the best that he could with it. The idea was to get Mark over as a strongman, and Jerry did that. The low point was Mark selling or not selling, if you will.
Yeah.
He really didn't know how yet. And Jerry was trying everything that he could to get some kind of cheap heat on him. And it didn't happen to where he finally just, let's go home and get out of here. So it was designed to give Mark Henry a big win for his debut match.
And how about this? It's a really bad spot for Mark Henry and for Jerry Lawler. I mean, Lawler's the old pro, and I get that he's supposed to take care of him, but at the same time, he's on pay-per-view with a guy who's having really one of his first matches ever. So it's almost a no-win situation, but I guess it's almost like when you draft the first round quarterback, you feel as a team owner, well, we're supposed to play him. We're paying him all this money. That's got to be part of the thinking in getting Mark Henry out here, right? I mean, he's got a big contract. We got to let him do something.
And Vince had a fascination with strongmen and really felt, look, Mark Henry is a human being, is one of the most charismatic and entertaining guys on the face of the earth.
Sure.
So you were seeing that outside and going, man, I can get that guy over. But when Mark first started, he thought he had to play a part, and you didn't get the Mark Henry that we all knew and loved. So it was a learning curve. It's a learning curve for all of us.
Let's talk about the next move that we have, because it feels like we're breaking in a lot of new guys. Well, how about the next time we see him on pay-per-view is Survivor Series. It's Mark Mero and Rocky Maivia, a debuting Rocky Maivia, Barry Windham and Jake Roberts taking on Crush, Jerry Lawler, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and Goldust. I absolutely love this show. It's one of my favorite pay-per-views that nobody really talks about, Survivor Series 1996, but look at all the Hall of Fame talent in there. I mean, Goldust, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Jerry Lawler, Jake the Snake, Barry Windham, the fucking Rock. Oh yeah. Mark Mero and Crusher there too. Pretty fun little combination, old school. Probably one of the last times we saw a Survivor Series match like this. Only got 2 stars, most notable for the Rock's debut. And the Rock, much like a lot of these other guys we've talked about today, got his start in Memphis, right?
He did. Flex Cavana. So we knew that, putting Lawler in there would help Rocky be at ease. And goddamn, he's got to be a star one day. You're WWF champion. You got to give him a name people are going to love. Rocky Maivia. No, Rocky Maivia we came up with. It was here's the thing. I thought he did a great job in his first high profile match. And a lot of that was due to the comfort level of Lawler being in there. He was used to Jerry. That always helps.
Let's touch on the next major angle that Lawler is involved in it. February 17th, 1997, Lawler does a promo, how nobody knows about ECW. All their wrestlers are guys who couldn't hack it in the WWF. And then later in the show, Paul Heyman calls in and cuts a promo saying that ECW is going to be at the Manhattan Center for Raw the next week. Lawler called their talent misfits, no talent bums, et cetera, and Heyman brings up the Neighborhood Watch program, alluding to Lawler's legal problems a few years back. And Lawler shot back about cracking his jaw, which he did back in 1987 in Missouri when Heyman was a rookie. Why is there real heat between Lawler and Heyman, and why did it make sense for them to be put together in this sort of situation?
Jerry had been very outspoken about ECW, and Paul got his first big break in Memphis with Lawler. Paul and Tommy Rich shaved Lawler's head in a cage. So I don't think that there was ever any real heat with him. I know that Paul always appreciated what Lawler did for him. And I don't know if Paul left on the right way with Jerry. There might've been a little residual heat there, but it's business. And Jerry Lawler was a guy that can take a work, spin it to where you think, the rest of the shit, that's bullshit. What he's saying right now, they're live. That's the only reason he's saying it, because they won't edit it. This is real.
Right.
That was the feeling with Lawler. Lawler could convince you. Heyman could convince you. Heyman was that loose cannon that you didn't know what he was going to say or do. So it was, you put two of those together, two great talkers. This was what Piper and Lawler should have been.
Really?
In my opinion, yeah.
As far as just the verbal sparring.
As far as the verbal sparring and the delivery of it.
Wow. Well, that's fun. I didn't know that you felt that way, but I could totally see it. That I guess I'm more of a Heyman fan than a Piper fan, which I know you're going to hang up on me now, but I guess that's what you grow up on. The February 24th Raw, Shamrock's sitting ringside, and Lawler speaks to Shamrock saying ABC called him the world's dangerous man. And Lawler asked the crowd if they know about the UFC, and they cheer a little bit. And Lawler said he and Shamrock used to train together. And so of course, Shamrock says he doesn't know Lawler and calls him a liar, which is a fun bit. Later in the show, Taz is beating Mikey Whipwreck in an ECW sort of showcase match, and Dangerously says on camera, this is awesome. Man, has this show sucked without ECW or what? And that gets Dangerously and Lawler going at it during the match. And Lawler's making fun of Taz's height, saying he bought an ant farm as a second home, which is fucking hilarious. Shout out to Taz, brother. Paul defends his guy and says, coming from a guy that's 5'10", who was on top of the territory for 76 years, that is the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard. And then Lawler asked Paul Lee, why don't they do what they usually do and set some fans on fire or hit each other with bar baseball bats? And Paul Lee said they'd rather do that on pay-per-view. And Sabu interrupts all this by jumping off the Raw entryway letters onto Team Taz, and Lawler calls Sabu an idiot. And here we go. So it's a pretty fun little segment here. And you even get a shout out. McMahon mispronounces Mikey Whipwreck's name. And Paul Lee said, you really need to watch the tapes that Bruce Prichard leaves on your desk, which I think is fun. And just because I enjoy it, Lawler makes another knock about Taz's height and says, I've got socks taller than him. What do you remember about this Manhattan Center ECW Raw, especially with the interaction with Lawler and Heyman?
Just classic. It was classic. And you get that New York feel of it being special. You're in that Manhattan Center, and that's a cool feeling anyway. And for these guys to come in their first appearance, they had that following in New York, and man, it was good. I'll tell you what, I bust on ECWs. I bust their balls all the time. The one thing that sticks in my mind about this day, the ECW guys all walked in together like a team. They're all wearing
the ECW
warm-ups, the ECW warm-ups.
Yeah.
And they all walked around kind of like as a team and shook everyone's hand and introduced themselves. They didn't go hole up in a corner. They were as professional could be. And that was one thing that stuck in Vince's mind was, God damn it, look at them. They look good. They look like a team. So that was the positive of it. And it was exciting for New York. But Lawler and Heyman, man, they just had natural, great chemistry.
No doubt about it, man. Let's talk about the debate that they did on March 10th. Lawler tells Heyman that more people are seeing ECW at that moment than had ever seen ECW before, because they're just a bunch of misfits and thugs. And Heyman starts screaming at Lawler to shut the hell up. And the Eliminators come to the ring, Sandman, Tommy Dreamer. Sandman offers to cane Lawler, but Heyman tells him not to. And Lawler said he doesn't understand why McMahon is allowing them to plug the pay-per-view for ECW on Raw. And Heyman takes a shot at Jerry Lawler and says his sons don't call themselves Lawler because they're ashamed of their dad. And Lawler pops off, well, at least I'm not a 35-year-old who lives with my mom and dad like you do. So some real inside baseball here. And I guess what people mostly remember from this is Rob Van Dam started to call himself Mr. Monday Night. At this point, did you guys already know, hey, for their second pay-per-view and on the way to that second pay-per-view, we're going to have Lawler do something with them and sort of do a talent trade and loan him down there? Or had that even come up at this point?
At this point, no, I think we had, because I think Paul had asked for something and Lawler was the most logical guy. So at that point, here, yeah, I do think that Jerry was already a part of it and agreed to do it.
Let's talk about the May 26th Raw. This is going to be uncomfortable, but we should cover it because we're going to get asked about it if we don't. Jerry's doing a promo here on Goldust. They're going to have a match, and there's a ton of heat in this stuff that you couldn't say today. Lawler says, Goldust's old man, Old Dust, doesn't love you anymore. Well, I know Dusty Rhodes, and he told me why. It's because you married the biggest gold digger in Georgia and then put on a woman's wig and went around kissing men like a flaming F-word. The crowd pops big for that word, by the way. Regarding his daughter Dakota, or Goldust's daughter Dakota, Lawler said, you should have named that little brat Target because I heard everybody in Atlanta had a shot at it. And the fans pop again. And they replay Lawler asking Goldust if he was a queer from before. And they bleep out the word, but they didn't bleep out the F word earlier. Obviously you guys are easing into the attitude era here. You're trying to be more controversial. You're trying to, sort of push the envelope. It is definitely a different time. Things have changed, et cetera, et cetera. Was there any heat on him for the promo? Was it approved beforehand? Did USA come down on anybody? What do you remember about this promo that's popped up at least once a year for 10 years now?
You know, I don't know. There wasn't any heat on anybody. It was controversial and it was edgy. I think that all of the stuff that was done between Lawler and Goldust, that was all discussed ahead of time because it's real comments. It's all sensitive with real people. Anytime that you're dealing with children like Dakota, man, that's touchy and that's sensitive. However, you know, it was all in Dusty. All of it was all discussed ahead of time. And if you want to get, you know, let's get real. Let's go where people say, ooh, they weren't supposed to say that.
Right.
And that was a delivery. And that was something Jerry Lawler could pull off that people would believe he wasn't supposed to go there. So that was a way to get that thing going to make people believe.
Later in the show, of course, Jerry wrestles Goldust. It's for a King of the Ring tournament. And Ross says that Lawler is an accomplished artist and he worked in radio as a DJ before getting into wrestling. And then McMahon mentioned that Lawler once sued the WWF over the King moniker. And JR brings up Lawler's feud with Andy Kaufman on Letterman. So they're running through a lot of history in the commentary on this, but as you can imagine, Lawler beats Goldust with his feet on the ropes for leverage just to put even more heat on him. On the June 2nd Raw, we see Helmsley team up with Lawler to take on Mankind and Ahmed Johnson. Mankind winds up turning on Ahmed Johnson, and then Helmsley turns on Lawler, where Chyna ends up decking Lawler and Johnson pins him with the Pearl River Plunge. But the most notable thing that happens in June is WrestlePalooza 1997 at the ECW arena. What do you know? The lights go out, and when they come back on, Jerry the King Lawler is in the ring and the place goes bananas. It's quite the spectacle because you've got Jerry Lawler, Rob Van Dam, and Sabu pretty much laying waste to the entire roster. And then Heyman comes out and goes after Lawler. Lawler begins beating on Paul Lee, leaves him laying in the ring. This would eventually lead to Taz burning a Monday Night Raw shirt on a metal folding chair in the middle of the ring. I mean, this is crazy, crazy heat. I know you weren't a huge ECW fan, but did you ever see this WrestlePalooza 97 skit?
Absolutely.
What'd you think?
I thought it was great. It was a Paul Heyman idea and something he had come to us with, and we agreed to do it. Lawler agreed to do it. And it was something for that ECW crowd, man. There's not going to be any more heat than a WWE guy in the middle of their ring, in their building, in their town. So beautifully done. Lawler was the right guy because Lawler was the one spewing all the, extremely crappy wrestling on the WWF network, Raw. So it was good shit and real heat.
Yeah. He had fun lines too. Like, the ECW arena should be made out of toilet paper because everything in it's shit. I mean, it's
true.
Like, oh, fuck off. Come on.
Well, you're telling me that's not a great line. You just said it was a great line.
It is
saying true. It was a great line.
Oh, okay. There you go.
And now where else you want to take it?
Let's talk about, what a busy weekend this was, because a few days later, he's involved for the first time, in a minute, the King of the Ring tournament, but at the pay-per-view, he wrestles Mankind in the semifinals. Of course, Mankind gets the win. Two Hall of Famers, to be sure, star in 3/4, but it's sort of weird because they're both heels, right?
Jerry was kind of quasi, but Mankind at this time, I think that he's still a lovable heel. So,
yeah, I mean, he's going to be a heel for sure, but
but he was lovable.
Okay. We'll go with it. The next night on Raw, Lawler brings Van Dam to ringside, at which point Heyman and Dreamer had to be held back by officials from jumping the rail and going after him. And then JR even acknowledges that Lawler and Van Dam invaded the ECW arena on Saturday night. And, later in the show, RVD would pin Flash Funk, who was Too Cold Scorpio in ECW. And, Lawler would, eventually be involved in a skirmish when Paulie would jump the railing. And eventually, of course, Tommy Dreamer makes the save. Van Dam jumps Dreamer. There's a big pull apart. And Paulie has a lot of comments that are bleeped by the USA Network. And McMahon said ECW had no business jumping the railing and they were at fault for the incident. And that's not what the war zone is all about. It's about athletic competition. Any heat on, Paul Lee for letting some foul language fly here and the USA having to bleep it?
USA didn't bleep it.
Okay.
We bleeped it. Exactly what he was doing.
I like it. We get lots of plugs here for the Hardcore Heaven pay-per-view. And, of course the story is going to be that it's going to be Jerry Lawler taking on Tommy Dreamer at the pay-per-view. And when McMahon and JR asked what Paulie knew about Brian Christopher, which is a match that we're going to be featuring here on Raw on June 16th, Candido versus Brian Christopher. Paulie says, you want me to shoot? You want me to ruin Raw again? This guy's Jerry Lawler's son. Jerry Lawler never acknowledged him as his own son in Memphis. And the guy never admitted his father was Jerry Lawler. And I don't blame him. His mother's probably 38 years old. What a line. You know, they had kept that close to the vest all these years. Were the guys okay with it being exposed like this? I mean, surely so, but it does feel like, oh, I don't know if he's supposed to say that, which is probably the desired effect, right?
Exactly. And it was something that, you know, Paul came back with, you know, if you would like for me to do something that people would say, oh my God, I knew that, but they would never say it. And that's what he's great at. He's great at blurring the line. And Lawler was, obviously Lawler was cool with it. Everybody in Memphis knew that was his kid.
Sure.
But he, wanted Brian to have his own career and do his own thing.
Jerry makes another famous appearance at the ECW arena on June 8th. This time during the main event with Sabu and Van Dam. They're taking on Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman. The lights go out. And when they come back on, Lawler is in the ring. And they're working over Dreamer and Sandman. This time, Dreamer and Sandman make a comeback, but the lights go out again. And when they come back on, Cornette's in the ring and he lays out everybody in sight with the tennis racket, including, Jerry hitting Tommy so hard in the balls with Sandman's cane that it knocks him out. And, he had a major situation where he had to have a testicle drained after the match. Woo.
Yeah. Poor bastard.
What'd you, you probably watched this. What'd you think?
Well, again, man, the only person that would probably get more heat in the ECW arena than Jerry Lawler was Jim Cornette. Jim agreed to do it as a consolation because he felt that his friend Dennis Coralluzzo, who was a promoter in Philadelphia, he felt that Paul had taken advantage of Coralluzzo, and Corny was like, if you'll apologize to Coralluzzo and get me a limousine from my house and pay for my dinner, and I got shit to go, motherfucker. I got the biggest steak, the biggest lobsters. I got 4 desserts. That motherfucker paid for all of it. And then he shook Dennis Coralluzzo's hand in the limousine. So that's kind of what it was all about. In a lot of respects, Paul was all about, I want Jim Cornette in the middle of my ring. I want that shock. I want that holy shit moment. And he got it. And he was willing to do whatever it took to get him in there and get that holy shit moment.
It's a pretty fun moment because lots of people in the wrestling business are sort of shocked to see this happen because, and you've talked about this before, that in your opinion, Jim Cornette and Paul Heyman are really the same person. Just, one's a Yankee and one's a redneck, or whatever the phrase you use is. Were you shocked that they're able to pull this off or put it together, because you had hung out with Cornette enough to know how he really felt about all this stuff?
I was happy that they were able to do it. It was good for business, and this business makes strange bedfellows. So it was good for business and it helped Paul out. And it kind of, got Corny and Paul at least working together a little bit. For whatever reason, I don't care how we got there. We got there.
On Raw, the next few weeks, we started to see Jerry get more involved with Brian Christopher, accompanying him to the ring, sometimes helping Brian beat up opponents. Was it ever considered making them a permanent on-screen duo? Feels like you guys tried it on for a few months, but it didn't last long.
Not really. And I don't think that Jerry really wanted to do it. As I said earlier, it was something that Jerry wanted Brian to be out on his own, but with the Paul Heyman saying, that's your son, it was okay. We can capitalize on it a little bit, but I don't think that either one of them wanted to go too much further into that relationship.
Let's talk about the USWA. The wrestlers are brought into a meeting on July 10th and told that new money is going to be put into the company and they're going to be expanding operations, but that Lawler is going to no longer be running things. So people start to say that Lawler has no ownership in the company, but Meltzer says that's not the case. He's just not going to be involved in the day-to-day running of the operations. And Lawler's new title is Vice President in charge of public relations. What was going on here? Was Lawler realizing, hey, this is on its last legs. I don't want a financial stake in this anymore.
They had someone that wanted to buy the company. So, it was, I'm not saying that's what they did here, but there was an old practice in the South, especially in Alabama there and Continental, where I don't know how many times that territory was sold over and over and over again. You're selling air. Basically, in a lot of respects, but you would get somebody with money that would come in and, hey, this looks like a real profitable business. So would you be interested in selling? Sure. They sell the company, the business goes in the ground, and then the promoter comes right back in and starts running it all over again, and then sell it to somebody else down the line. And in this particular situation, there was someone that wanted to purchase the business. So why not?
Well, let's talk about a more safe investment. Robinhood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission free. While other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, Robinhood doesn't charge any commission fees. So you can trade stocks and keep all your profits. Plus, there's no account minimum deposit needed to get started, so you can start investing at any level. The simple, intuitive design of Robinhood makes investing easy for newcomers and experts alike. View easy to understand charts and market data, and place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. You can also view stock collections such as 100 most popular. With Robinhood, you can learn how to invest in the market as you build your portfolio, discover your new stocks, track your favorite companies, and get custom notifications for price movements so you never miss the right moment to invest. Check this out, guys. Robinhood is giving the listeners of Something to Wrestle a free stock, like Apple, Ford, or Sprint, to help you build your portfolio. Sign up right now at wrestle.robinhood.com. I want to give that to you again, guys. It's a free stock. What are you waiting for? Sign up right now at wrestle.robinhood.com. And this is so easy, even you can do it. Right, Bruce?
I do it, and I have my Robinhood account and quite happy with it.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I was happy with another ECW appearance for Jerry Lawler as well. He actually wrestled in a cage match there on July 19th. It's Lawler, Rob Van Dam, and Sabu taking on Tommy Dreamer and Sandman. And Rick Rude, who's actually doing commentary during this time with Joey Styles, says that he's the mystery partner, which gets a huge reaction. Lawler calls him a cripple, but he comes to the ring, gets in the cage, and is immediately clotheslines Dreamer, and then rams Beulah into the cage, and the heels destroy Sandman and Dreamer once again. So it's a pretty fun deal here where everybody's turning and siding with the WWF. Then Terry Funk comes out to make the save, but he's jumped by the triple threat. A really, really fun angle, especially if you're an ECW fan. They handcuff Sandman to the cage, start destroying him, and they're building a ton of heat on the way to Hardcore Heaven. The main event is not Jerry Lawler, but it is the thing with the most heat. He's going to wrestle Tommy Dreamer, and they're going to brawl all over the crowd. They get plenty of time, nearly 19 minutes. Meltzer would say it went way too long and was totally over gimmicked, but a lot of people thought it was the best match and others thought it was the worst match. But that's just because, there's so much heat with it from these diehard ECW fans. Meltzer only gave it a half a star, not even a full star here. And of course, Tommy Dreamer, our hero, if you're an ECW fan, beats Jerry Lawler. Did you ever watch the Hardcore Heaven pay-per-view?
Other than the thing with Lawler and the one with Corny, no. I didn't.
Well, this is the wrestling debut of the Insane Clown Posse, as far as I know. Not that they're wrestling, but they're here. And Jenna Jameson. And I know those are two of your favorites.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, but I didn't see this one. Thank God.
All right, here we go. Here's the story we were talking about a minute ago, and I'm glad you teased it because you knew it was coming. Meltzer report in September of 97, Mark Selker, one of the three Cleveland-based part owners of the USWA, filed a lawsuit on September 11th against Jerry Lawler and Larry Burton, the latter of whom owned the other 50% of the ownership, charging fraud in the sale of the company. Lawler was served with lawsuit papers by an armed guard at the television taping. 2 days later, Selker sent a memo to the wrestlers at the September 14th house show in Memphis stating that this wasn't a USWA incorporated card and he wasn't responsible for paying them. The show went on as scheduled before a crowd of 207 fans, with Larry Burton agreeing to pay the wrestlers, and a subsequent show was scheduled for September 16th in Louisville, headlined by Jerry Lawler and Tommy Dreamer, with Burton saying he'd pay the wrestlers for both that show and a casino show later in the week, which, if canceled, would violate an important company contract for regular guaranteed money casino date. Lawler was scheduled to fly into Louisville for that show after doing voiceovers the day before, and earlier on September 16th, Eugene Selker, the father and attorney for Mark Selker, attempted and was turned down in federal court in Cleveland in an attempt to get a temporary restraining order to keep Lawler and Burton from doing any business within the company until the resolution of the lawsuit. Yikes. The lawsuit alleges mail fraud, theft by fraud, fraudulent business practices, and fraud as it relates to the sale of the company. And the claim in the suit is that Lawler and Burton doctored the books to inflate the value of the company, syndication profits, and when that potential was inflated, expenses were understated, and the defendants withheld important information, including knowledge of the expected time slot on channel WMC. There have been rumors of criminal charges being filed as well. Lawler said it was just a case of people buying a business, then losing money in the business and suing the previous owners. Both Lawler and Burton claim that the Selkers have done this same scenario with two separate businesses in an attempt to gain complete control of the company and then remove Burton from the company. Did you ever talk to Jerry about this? Because it does seem a lot like the story you sort of laid out a minute ago.
Yeah, I did talk to Jerry about it. And Jerry's point of view was that they had a buyer. Jerry basically wanted to sell out. He wanted to sell. He didn't want to be in charge of it anymore. And he felt that if they were willing to pay the price that they asked, he was going to do it. And it would kind of relieve him of having any more 100% responsibility, which he didn't have. He was partners with Jerry Jarrett, and they bought Jarrett out before they went and sold to this other company. But Jerry Jerry was looking to sell that, move on, and felt that these guys had come in and represented themselves as being able to run it and get all these television deals and everything else. And again, I'm getting my information from Lawler, and Lawler was like, hey, if we can do this, then we'll have a percentage of it and continue on and make even more money. But more than anything, I think he was looking for that initial payday from them buying the company. And then when they got into it and they realized what they had, and that this isn't just some, you put the show on television and then you advertise your shows and people come. A little more than that. It takes work and it takes talent, and it takes a while to get there. So I think it was kind of a combination of both, that maybe they weren't represented as far as how much work this is really going to take and how much of an investment after the initial investment that it's going to take. The buyers might have been a little naive. Okay, I buy this, I'm instantly going to just start printing fucking money. And that didn't happen. And I think that they got scared at that point, and goddamn, we were frauded. I don't know if they were or not. I wasn't involved in any of that bullshit, but from Jerry's side, I was just told that, hey, I'm going to sell the company, and yoo-hoo for me. Yay.
The crux of the situation is that Lawler and Jarrett each owned 50% of the company dating back to the early 80s. In December, Lawler purchased Jarrett's 50% for either $250,000 or $262,000, of which Jarrett himself received, depending upon the source, somewhere between $175,000 and $187,000, with the remaining $75,000 supposedly going to Burton for being the intermediary on the deal. Jarrett at the time was seriously thinking about folding the company, which was no longer profitable, and had openly said that receiving any money at that time for his stock in USWA he saw as a gift from above. The Selkers, who had raised $1.5 million to buy the company outright, were then told that Burton had purchased Lawler's 100% of the company for $2,500,000 of which was paid immediately, and the remaining 1.5 would be coming in 6 payments of $250,000 each. The Selkers began making payments to Burton for 50% of the company based on his half of the company being worth $1 million. And when this lawsuit comes out, Lawler says he's going to countersue because they've stopped paying him his $125,000 a year salaried front office position. So lots of frustration going back and forth. If all these allegations are correct and one were to put all the pieces together, this is directly from the Observer, it would appear that Lawler, the 100% owner of the company, was on paper paying Burton this ridiculous amount of money, which got kicked back to him as a huge purchase price for his shares. Plus Lawler theoretically paid Burton $75,000 as the intermediary on the Jarrett deal. So there may be a paper trail of Lawler and Burton paying each other huge sums of money as a salary and a brokering fee in one direction, and as the purchase price for the company in the other direction, with them using the same money to pay each other, thus little or no actual money changing hands, but making it on paper appear to greatly inflate the actual value of the company. Lawler wouldn't confirm the $750,000 figure when asked, but has admitted to the Pro Wrestling Torch that Burton was hired for a huge salary because he believed with the money the Selkers being put into the company that they were going to greatly increase in business. Although he changed his spin on the latter point 180 degrees over the past week, claiming the Selkers were the people who got into a business they knew nothing about and were losing money hand over fist. This silliness continues, but this is, it's the end of Memphis, is it not?
Basically, yes. I think that the end of Memphis, it happened quite a while before that. Yeah. You look at Randy Savage and Jerry Lawler drawn to 850 people a few years before that. I think the end of Memphis had taken place a long time before this. And this was maybe an attempt at a resurgence of Memphis and trying to bring it back to life by an influx of money and new owners and coming in and doing all these innovative things. Happens every day in business. And it happened here. I tried. I stayed as far away from it as I possibly could because it didn't involve us. And again, it happens all the time.
Let's talk about December 14th in Memphis. The scheduled main event is Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett taking on Shawn Michaels and Hunter Hearst Helmsley, but it never took place. And the 5,078 fans at the Pyramid were not happy. Shawn Michaels has major heat here in December of 97, and there's so much garbage being thrown to the ring that it is not fun nor safe. Shawn is hit several times with Coca-Colas here, and then a large wad of tobacco juice nailed Helmsley in the face, at which point Michaels grabbed the house mic and said, "Well, that just cost you your main event," and walked out of the ring with Chyna and Helmsley. And when the crowd realized what happened, they got even more unruly. There's an attempt by Dude Love, who's at the event but couldn't wrestle due to fractured ribs, to get the crowd to chant HBK to try to urge Michaels to change his mind, but he refused to come back out. So Lawler apologizes to the crowd, but they ain't having it. They're throwing shit at Lawler too. And they're demanding that Lawler wrestle Jarrett. And Lawler explains that he didn't have a contract to wrestle Jarrett, so that match can't take place. What type of heat did Jerry and Michaels have over this? Because this is not a Jerry Lawler move to not deliver the main event.
No, it's not. It's not anybody's move to not deliver the main event. And it was one of those things that, hey, Shawn did, and it costs you goodwill in the marketplace whenever any crazy things like that happen. So Jerry's got to live there. So for him, it's even worse because he's the guy in the main event. The main event's not delivered, and he's got to face those people every day. So it wasn't good for the market. It wasn't good for anybody. And unfortunately, a shitty situation that, in my opinion, hell, I would have, if I was in the same situation, Jerry and Jeff probably should have done something to alleviate it. I also understand, not doing it, but at that point, do something to calm it down, calm the situation down.
Jerry is starting to do an angle with Al Snow, who's coming back from his time in ECW. And Jerry promised Al that he'd get him a meeting with Vince. And it eventually led to a match at the King of the Ring, 1998, with Al Snow and Head taking on Too Cool, and Lawler is the ref. The finish saw Snow hit everyone with Head, which is kind of fun. Lawler refuses to count the fall. And that's sort of the story. Eventually, Christopher gets a bottle of Head and Shoulders shampoo and put Head on the bottle and then covered, and Lawler counted since the bottle represented Head's shoulders.
Well, because the shoulders were down.
Yeah. It's just, in 99, Jerry makes that movie, Man on the Moon. It's a movie about the life of Andy Kaufman, which he talks about at the top of the show. For some reason, they almost cast Disco Inferno from WCW to play Jerry before they found out that, hey, Jerry was available, and Jerry offered to play himself. Did you ever hear about that? I mean, how crazy would that have been if Disco and fucking Inferno was Jerry Lawler instead?
Yeah, I didn't. I've never heard that, but that's funny. It would have been great.
Of course, during filming, Jim really got into the character of Andy Kaufman, and he would intentionally try to piss off Jerry Lawler to make him mad. And, all of that is covered in that documentary, which we've recommended really, really strongly. But Jerry would say things like, I'd be standing somewhere and Jim would run up behind me and push me, and I'd turn around and he'd run off like a little kid. After a while, it started to piss me off. One time he actually stuck a piece of paper on my back, and I was walking around the set with a sign on my back that said Hulk Hogan wannabe. Did Lawler ever tell you about Jim pulling some of these crazy hijinks and not coming out of character?
Okay. I wasn't there. I don't know, but I would, if I were betting, all 100% fucking work. Every single bit of it. No different. Yeah. It's all the work. It's just a work.
Thank you. Bob Zamuda was Andy Kaufman's good friend and business partner for many years. And he's a big part of this. And, of course they did the whole pile driver thing. Do you want to tell everybody the story on that?
Oh God. It's just, again, it was all fucking work. And they did where Lawler and Jim Carrey got into it, and that Jim Carrey spit on Lawler, and Lawler grabbed him and hurt his neck, and that, Jim Carrey went to the hospital. It was all just to reenact all the same shit that he did with Andy Kaufman. To do it with Jim Carrey, so the people would, this character actor, Jim Carrey, has gotten himself so deep into character that he's even recreated that this big bad wrestler hurt him. Work. I don't know if it was or not, but if I were a bet man, I'd pretty much bet my house on it.
This is, it's a fun story, even if it is a work, but, allegedly they even tried to shut down the filming of the movie and et cetera, et cetera. I guess we should mention Lawler's continuing to do mostly commentary over the next few years. And then in the summer of 2000, Jerry starts to become a babyface. Taz was starting to bully Jim Ross, and Jerry came to the aid of JR. And that led to a match at SummerSlam 2000, which happened on August 27th in Raleigh, North Carolina. Lawler would pin Taz in 4 minutes and 34 seconds. There's a fun spot in here we've talked about before. JR gets off his chair and smashes a glass jar of candy on Taz's head. And Taz has only gotten color a few times in his career, according to Meltzer here. And he would say he bled, as did Ross's hand, from the breaking of the glass. And Lawler scored the pin to a gigantic pop. Meltzer wrote, it was kept short, but the people got what they wanted out of it. 1.25 stars. What'd you think of the match, the angle, and the decision to turn Jerry a babyface this way?
Highly entertaining. And it was a fun deal. And I think it got Taz's personality over in a different way. And people liked Jerry anyway because of his wit, and he had some clever lines, and he came, you know, as I said in the very beginning, Lawler could be a great heel or a great baby face in a flick of a switch. It was that easy for him, and he was so convincing at both. But I thought it showed the most personality out of Taz up until that point, and it let people see, okay, wait a minute, man, there is something. Taz is more than this one-dimensional suplex machine. And here you got to see it.
Yeah, you did. When the XFL started in 2001, Jerry's brought in to be a commentator, and he claimed he never wanted to announce for the XFL. And he would even admit on air that he knew and cared almost nothing about the sport, but he agrees to do it after McMahon and Dunn asked him to. He wrote, "I had all sorts of lines. Some I got to use, some I didn't. When I'm around the cheerleaders, I like to use the terms tight end and wide receiver. We heard the cheerleaders will be encouraged to date the players. I think the cheerleaders dating the announcers should be mandatory." And he always took little digs at football. He said, "The players were paid so little. I saw one guy putting a Big Mac on layaway." I can't believe that's real. What'd you think of Lawler as an XFL commentator? We didn't really spend much time talking about him on our XFL episode, but I mean, he admits he's not a football fan, but I guess they just think he's got natural charisma and wit and timing. Why not?
Yeah, they wanted that crossover a little bit, and Jerry was entertaining. They thought, well, you just take the same entertaining wit that he has doing wrestling color and add it to football. I didn't like it. I really didn't care for it that much. And I thought that the team of JR and Jesse was actually pretty good. And when you compare that to Jerry having to get Matt Vasgersian through games, it was like watching a bad or listening to a bad soundtrack of Monday Night Raw with football in the background.
Yeah.
So it didn't work.
The USA Today even gave him an F for commentary. And they wrote something like, "Jerry Lawler reached an all-time low by saying we're in the land of milk and honeys." And he gave a retort to his local Memphis paper. And he said something like, "If that guy thinks that was an all-time low, he doesn't know me very well."
No shit.
Let's get to February 2001. We're at the No Way Out pay-per-view, and Jerry is going to wrestle Steven Richards from the Right to Censor. And Steven gets the win in 5 minutes and 31 seconds. And the steps were, if Lawler wins, Cat would strip. But if Richards won, Cat has to join the RTC. And they didn't have a little N for nudity on the parental warning. So I guess that tells you ahead of time that we're not going to see any naughty bits. In the end though, you know the deal. Steven Richards gets the win. RTC puts Cat in a burlap sack and take her away. 1.5 stars. It is sort of weird that the stip is, if I win, my wife gets to get naked.
Yeah, but she wasn't portrayed as his wife.
Yeah. It's just weird though. Let's talk about why we're really here though. This is probably the storyline or the bit of news that most people want to hear about. Stacy the Cat Carter is suddenly fired, and Jerry immediately quit in protest. Meltzer would write, "Very sketchy details at press time other than Stacy Carter was released on February 27th, which was strange, being that it was right in the middle of an angle they were doing with her being kidnapped. And upon hearing that news, Lawler quit the company in protest. According to the reports, Lawler was at the production meeting going over the show until 2 p.m., then left. When he came back at 4 p.m., Ross told him they had to release Carter. Lawler said he told Ross and McMahon that if she is let go, then he would quit. They didn't change their decision, and he left. Lawler said to his webmaster that there was no incident or provocation of any kind that led up to this, and that both he and Carter have no idea why this happened. They denied there was any refusal by Carter to do something with the current angle. And there were other reports that Lawler had pressured or convinced McMahon to give Carter an angle, as she had, for all real purposes, been off TV for some time, and he acquiesced at first. This becomes a very intriguing story because Lawler is tied to so many facets of the business, including being a color man of every major show, Raw, SmackDown, pay-per-views, and the XFL. as well as being a key part of the developmental territory in Memphis. If this was another point in history, it would be one thing, because a talent like Lawler could go to another territory while things simmered down, but he really has no alternative to make any real money in this business and then come back at some point. Because Taz was in New York while all this went down, it forced him to have Ross do color with Cole for SmackDown. It's believed that Taz will get the color spot on all the shows, which is an enormous amount of pressure on him at this point, because he's been a lot better in small portions at the pay-per-view so far. We'll talk about, Jerry's side of things and his perspective,
and then we'll tell the truth.
Well, okay, we'll do that then. We'll do that first.
No, go ahead. I want to hear, let's go through his version of it, and I'll tell you what happened.
Jerry wrote, JR said, telling me this is one of the hardest things he's ever had to do. And he said he didn't know how to tell Stacy. And that's when JR asked me if I could tell her. And I thought, this is one hell of a no. They're firing my wife and they want me to tell her she's fired. So that's when I told JR, yeah, I'll tell her. I'll tell her we're on our way back to Memphis, because if she's fired, I'm leaving too. When I knocked on the door to the ladies' locker room, I don't even remember which diva answered, but I asked for Stacy, and in a moment she was peeking around the corner, just half dressed. As far as she knew, she was on in a couple hours away from one of her biggest roles to date on SmackDown. She was getting ready early. I think she could tell on my face that something was wrong. I just said, baby, get dressed and get your things. We're leaving. She looked at me like I was kidding and said, why, what's wrong? I believe she thought I had some sort of death in the family, or there was some kind of emergency or something. Tell me what's wrong. Why are we leaving? I just said, JR told me that Vince is giving you your release. So I told him I'm leaving too. So get your things and let's go. And she stunned and looked at me and said, why? When she gathered her things together, we took them out along with my bag, threw them in the rental car. We got in the car and I started it off, and then I turned the engine off and I said, let's go talk to Vince. We walked back into the arena and up to Vince's office. It was a very small office that day, and at each show, it's a different room chosen to be Vince's office. And usually they're pretty nice and spacious, but this one was not much bigger than a broom closet. When I looked in, Vince was sitting there eating that protein bar, talking on the phone. And I said, Vince, can we talk to you for a second? He motioned for us to come in and sit down while he finished his phone call. The room was so small that when I sat down, my knee was actually touching Vince's. I was pretty sure that whoever he was talking to on the phone was informing him that I was leaving along with Stacy. When he got off the phone, Stacy asked Vince what she had done so bad for being fired for it. And that's when the mystery began. Vince said he didn't really know what she had done. It was a talent relations issue. Well, JR is the head of talent relations, and he had just sworn to me he had no idea of the reason for Stacy's firing. So I said to Vince, Jim Ross said someone was unhappy with her attitude. If that's the case, shouldn't someone have come to us and said, Stacy, there's a problem. We need to talk to you and get straightened out? Vince said, yes, someone should have come to Stacy and talked to her about that. And I pointed out that no one did. No one said anything to either of us about any kind of problem. Well, they should have, Vince said. And that's when I knew Stacy's attitude wasn't the real reason she was being fired. Stacy and Chyna had been really close friends up until Chyna got featured in Playboy magazine. And then for one reason or another, they drifted apart. And I wondered if Chyna had been upset with the sudden push that Kat was getting with the right to censor angle. We both thought that could have been the reason Stacy was fired. One of the people from the office who was instrumental in getting Chyna hooked up with Playboy had asked Stacy if she would be interested in posing for the magazine. When Stacy said she would, the person set up a meeting with Hugh Hefner. Stacy and I went to the Playboy mansion and met Hef. We spent a few minutes with him, and he said to Stacy, we have a great relationship with the WWE, and as far as I'm concerned, you'd be perfect to be the next diva in our magazine. Stacy was really excited, but somehow word got back to the company that Stacy and I had gone out there on our own and met with Hefner behind their back. Like, I know Hugh Hefner. I could just call him up and say, Hef, this is King. I want you to put Stacy in Playboy. We never really got the misunderstanding straightened out, and Stacy and I thought that may have been the reason she was fired. Another item going around was that she was fired because there was a photograph of her kissing Chyna, like some sort of lesbian pictures or something. The truth is, there was a picture on the internet of Stacy and Chyna with their faces close together and their lips puckered. The picture was taken by me and had actually only been on my website for more than a year, and they were mugging for the camera, not kissing. I really had no idea what had gone wrong. I wrote a heartfelt letter to Vince and said I wish the whole thing hadn't happened, but at no point did I beg for my job back. Anyway, I didn't hear a word back from Vince. For a long time, I didn't hear anything from anyone. The communication was through lawyers, and it was an ugly situation. All right. Now, you were there. What really happened?
Tucson, Arizona. We had gotten out of the meeting and it came up with Stacy had gone to some of the writers and was complaining and kvetching about whatever they had to do that night. And it was a constant battle that, you know, everything was a debate. And they came in and said, you know, we just want to end it because it's difficult. And they were like, done at that point. Jim was in talent relations. I think I was still in talent relations at that point too. So he says, hey, I need you to come with me. And Jim told me what was going on. I says, we got to let Stacy go. And I don't think it's going to be good because I don't know how King's going to react. And out of respect to King, he says, I want to do it. And I want to do it face to face. I need a witness. I hope he doesn't quit. So we went upstairs to JR's office and we sat in the little dressing room there, and JR said, King, got some bad news. And he says, we are not going to be continuing on with Stacy and we got to let her go. And I'm coming to you first out of respect. We're friends. And this is a difficult situation. You know, I don't want to do this. It's tough, but in business, sometimes you got to make tough decisions. And as a friend, I'm letting you know if how you would like to handle it. And Jerry said, you know, I've got a contract sitting on my desk at home for $300,000 or $500,000, whatever it was, from WCW that I could start tomorrow night if I wanted to. I says, well, I don't know if you can or not, based on your contract here, but I wish that you wouldn't do this. He goes, I don't know what to say. I understand that's your wife. And JR was very, you know, empathetic and trying to, it's an awkward situation. It's a shitty situation, no matter how you look at it. So Jerry says, well, if she goes, I go. And JR said something about, I feel like Martin and Lewis, and named somebody else, that I don't want to break up the team. I don't want to break you and I up. And, you know, Jerry again reiterated he could start at WCW tomorrow. He's got an offer from them and he doesn't need this place and it's for more money. And Jim tried to talk him down, and he says, well, if that's it, then we're out of here. And Jerry got up and left. So, you know, still no one had told Stacy yet. So I guess that's when Jerry went and told Stacy. And then they went to Vince's office and tried to talk to Vince, and Vince was in the middle of whatever he was doing. I have no idea what transpired at that meeting. I wasn't in there for that one. From there, Jerry went out to talk to Kevin Dunn in the truck. And Kevin, I think Kevin knew what was going to happen, but he didn't know Jerry had quit and was kind of confused. And so it all happened really fast, but it was a shitty situation that it was really difficult for JR. And I think with me sitting there, I think Jerry felt, well, I was somehow responsible for it, which I had been told moments before that by JR. So I had no idea until we got in there. Now, I do know that, you know, there was frustration with Stacy for some time with the creative team, and that they felt that, you know, a lot of pushback on things. And think the impression was that she had gotten a little big for her britches and gotten the big head. But again, that was outside and after the fact and so on and so forth. But yeah, it was the first thing he said was, yeah, I can go to WCW tomorrow. I've got a big contract. And JR was like, I really hope that's not what you do. I don't want you to quit. Let's stay and work this thing out. You know, time heals everything, and just chill. And he was gone. He left.
State clearly for the record again. Why was Stacy fired?
I think more it was just kind of pushback on everything. It was an accumulation of everything they brought to her creatively, that it was always an argument. And whatever had happened that day, and I still was never really clear on it, but whatever had happened that day, it was like, then you know what? If she doesn't want to do it, then move on. We got to go. Don't have time for this. And JR had come and gotten me and said, hey, I need you to witness this. And he buzzed me right before we went in the room and got King. So that was it. It was more of it was an attitude deal.
What were the rumors and innuendo surrounding her? You know, wrestling breeds a lot of paranoia and also breeds a lot of rumors and, shit talk. Everybody buries everybody, lots of negativity. It's not popular. It's not fun, but it is the reality that it exists sometimes. And, you know, this was an interesting time for the business where it's not quite as PC as it is now. It's a little more Wild West. Were there rumors or whispers about the cat one way or another?
There may have been, but I hate to repeat rumors and innuendo, because that's all it is rumors and innuendo. Unless you witness something yourself, that's not fair. That's not fair to anybody that can't defend themselves.
I'm not asking you to repeat it. I just wanted to ask if you heard it.
You hear shit all the time, but again, you hear shit about you and me all the time. So,
oh no, I'm not arguing that at all.
But from the business standpoint of it, that had nothing to do with it. It was more of an issue of just the antagonistic back and forth with creative at the time. And I can't even tell you, going back at that time, I don't even remember who the hell was even on creative at the time. So, you know, that's it. I mean, it's that comes down to that simple, and it's tough because her husband works there and he's an integral part of the show. Plus he's a friend. So he's somebody that's been a part of it the whole time. So it sucks. It's a very difficult situation to be in.
Lawler would write in his book that, you know, people would say that he overreacted to the firing of Stacy, but he said he can't believe anybody would think that a job was more important to a husband than his wife. And he didn't regret it. And his website was getting 60,000 hits a day because people were so fascinated with the story. And at the end of it, at around 5:30 on February 27th, 2001, just less than a month before WCW goes under, at that Tuesday in Tucson, Vince stands up with a protein bar in his left hand, extends his right hand and says, well, King, I want to thank you for everything you've done for us. You've gone above and beyond the call of duty and really helped us tremendously. Goodbye. And with that, his 9-year run with the World Wrestling Federation came to an end. And he wrote in his book, he thought it was some sort of joke or prank or rib, but he didn't detect any humor in Vince's eyes or compassion. Quote, all I saw was the straight ahead corporate stare of a company head who just made another business decision. One of hundreds of decisions Vince is called upon to make every day as the owner. And this decision hit him like a ton of bricks. It meant that they didn't want to be associated with him or his wife anymore. Their services were no longer needed. And he says he guesses he wasn't mad at Vince. He didn't want to punch him or anything. He was just hurt and disappointed. And just a week earlier, Vince had walked to him and said, King, I know you're going to love the segment I'm doing on the show with Trish Stratus tonight because you and I are cut from the same cloth. And he remembered feeling proud when Vince said that they thought alike, they had a lot in common, and he thought they did too. And he even wrote in the book that he had the honor of making Vince McMahon's first blade, the specially adapted razor blade that Vince used to cut his forehead and bleed on TV for the first time. But now all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, it's like they had nothing in common again. It's a weird story, man. And I think a lot of people probably wonder why Vince didn't make a different decision in that moment. Did you have a conversation with him about it?
No, but the thing is you're doing television, you're working, you own a business. Guy quits Okay. We pleaded with him not to and tried to make it work. Now, yes, we were letting his wife go. And I understand from a husband-wife thing. I understand that too. From Vince's point of view, it's a business, and I've got television to produce now. I'm very sorry that you've made this decision to quit. That's a bad one to make because it's hard to come back from that. Now, it's one thing to say it to us, and we're trying to talk you out of it. When you go to him with it, it's kind of over at that point. If you'd gone and said, you know what, I don't understand what's going on here. I'm not sure I can work tonight. I'd like to take the night off and give this some thought. That's different than saying I'm out, I quit. Emotions, I get both sides of it. Vince is, man, he's business next. Moving on. And somebody comes in to your office and say, Conrad, I quit. I really wish you wouldn't do that. I'd hope you'd reconsider. No, I quit. I'm out of here. I've got a better offer down the street at XYZ Mortgage.
See you later.
Are you gonna get up and shake their hand and say bye, or are you gonna get down on your hands and knees when you've got a closing in 30 minutes?
No. Listen, you got it right. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it does feel like they could have had a conversation about Cat and say, you know what? Let's just suspend her, send her home for 2 weeks. We'll figure it out. Get your ass out there and call the show. But I guess when you start waving your dick around saying I'm going to WCW, now it feels like, well,
you've already thought about this. You've got a deal. You didn't tell us about it. Now you're quitting. Okay. Good luck to you.
Yeah. I mean, there's another little thing in here where JR and Lawler are having a conversation before he goes to Vince. And he says, you know, if the shoe was on the other foot and you work for a company that fired Jan for no reason, would you stay? And JR responded, probably not. So Lawler says, well, I'm not either. And you know me well enough to know I'd react this way. And so does Vince. So I can only figure you guys want me to leave as well. You know, we never really talked about this, but was there any heat on Brian Christopher as a result of this?
God, I have no idea. I don't think so. But on the, you know, on the other side of it, it's you quit and you didn't give us an opportunity to talk about it.
Right.
We tried. And that opportunity left. And from my vantage point, just speaking for me, I didn't want Lawler to leave. And I wish that he wouldn't have reacted the way that he did. And I don't fault him for reacting the way that he did. At the same time, it's okay. I'm very sorry, man. I wish you wouldn't do that. And in the confines of that room at that time, you had the opportunity to say, can I, you know, I don't want to work tonight and I need to take care of my wife. I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to grab her and go. Just don't utter those two words. Don't tell us about your contract that you've got sitting on your desk.
Let me ask you about the way Meltzer reported it, because he says that it wasn't necessarily Stacy saying no to all the ideas. It was perhaps Stacy being in Lawler's ear saying, why couldn't I do this? Why couldn't I do that? You got to get me something, to the point where he says Lawler pushed for an angle to get his wife back in a prominent TV role after Joni Lawler had nixed Lawler's previous idea for his wife of doing an affair with Kat and Eddie Guerrero after the China breakup. And an angle was started on television and then abruptly dropped. Lawler came to the writers with the current angle, which would have led to her starting the right to nudity to build up to the recent pay-per-view match that Lawler would lose, forcing her to join Right to Censor. As the angle would continue, each male of the Right to Censor and storyline would weaken and succumb to her advances and sleep with her until it came down to the climatic scene to expose Stevie Richards as the ultimate hypocrite. Lawler had presented the idea to creative with a mixed response, so he went above their heads to McMahon, who agreed to do the angle. Some within the WWF said it was accumulation of things that took place over the last 2 weeks that led to her firing. Even before any of this had been rumblings from the Memphis side for years about Carter being featured prominently on television, both during periods where Lawler was part owner after he no longer held ownership interest. There was unhappiness on the WWF side with both Lawler and Carter at the pay-per-view because it took more time and more negotiations for the company to get the scenario and finish than they wanted out of the short Lawler-Richards match in Las Vegas than any other matches on the show, including the 3-fall Triple H Steve Austin match that went nearly 40 minutes. The gist of what Meltzer's writing is Lawler was feeling heat at home to help get his wife a more prominent spot on TV. So he was a little more persistent than maybe he should have been. And it wound up becoming more trouble than it was worth.
Becoming more trouble than it was worth is probably accurate. I have no idea what heat he may or may not have been feeling at home. So that's a big leap unless he heard that directly from Jerry. No, I didn't hear that. It was the issues were dealing with Kat. That's what we were told. And that was the frustration. So you remove her from that situation and you don't have that anymore. Maybe that is what happened. I couldn't tell you.
Lawler wanted to lose by DQ since for the angle to run its course, there was never any question Richard's hand was going up in the match since that was Lawler's idea. But he wanted to do that instead of the pinfall because he was in his home Memphis market. Meltzer would write, some felt Lawler and Carter were making suggestions so they would look good in the match, but it wasn't what the company wanted for the good of the match, such as the finish idea. Here's another little wrinkle. During all this, it was alleged that Carter yelled at office employee Richie Posner, which Carter denied and said she later went to Posner when the story got out and asked him if the two had a problem and if she had ever yelled at him. And reportedly, Posner said he knew nothing about such a story. Did you hear about Richie Posner and Kat having an issue?
Nope.
It's weird because Lawler's next move is to go on the offensive. He posted a lengthy story about the situation on his website, and he urged fans to send emails to various WWF creative team members about the situation. Of course, they get bombarded with emails, so they all change their email account addresses. And later in the week, encouraged fans to chant his name and bring signs for him and Kat to the taping in Washington, D.C. Then he gave regular mail addresses and phone numbers at the Titan offices to call and complain about Kat's firing. And of course, security is told to remove all the signs. And there were fewer typical long camera shots during the show, just so they didn't have a sign sneak into view. But there were some, we want Jerry audible chants, that made air on the show. Meltzer would write, if Lawler shows up on WCW TV, clearly it isn't an angle, but until that time, there is no real way to say without any certainty. So obviously some people are just, as we said earlier, there's some paranoia in the business. They think this might be an angle. Did anybody in the back think, they're just trying to work the boys? Or did everybody know, oh no, this is real?
No, everybody knew it was real. There's that feeling in the air. People knew it was real.
Jerry wrote that people were emailing him asking, how can they contact the powers that be? And he thought, well, here's an opportunity. He said he knew everyone's email address. So like an idiot, I posted the email addresses of the creative team, including the senior writer, Bruce Prichard, on my website and told the fans they could vent their frustrations right to the source. That's when it really hit the fan, because not only did their email addresses appear on my website, which was getting about 100,000 hits a day at that point, my updates, along with their addresses, were being reprinted on some of the biggest wrestling websites in the nation. They all carried my updates, and between them, they got close to 1 million hits a day. So you can imagine what happened. The computers at headquarters were inundated with emails. So many, in fact, the system shut down. And these weren't just ordinary emails. They were vicious, venomous, hate-filled, threatening types of emails. JR told me some fans even emailed him and said they hoped he got Bell's palsy again. Now, that was certainly not what I had intended when I posted the email addresses, but that's what happened. And it had the exact opposite effect on the company that I thought it would. I'd buried myself with the writers and Bruce Prichard, and I knew it was going to be a long time, if ever, anyone in the company wanted to hear my name again. What'd you think of the email stunt?
Thought it was stupid. It was asinine. And, it's like the little kid kicking and screaming, and it was horrible, horrible business. How would he have felt if we gave everybody his personal email and his home phone number and his cell phone number? Same difference. We wouldn't do that. That was unprofessional.
Well, the result of Jerry losing the spot means Paul Heyman actually gets the spot on Raw, which is fun timing because it's happening around the same time ECW is coming to a close. And this is something we've never really talked about here on the show. And I'm hoping you're open to telling the whole story. Jerry goes on a smear campaign, and one of those appearances is on the radio show Man Cow, which is one of the top rated shows in Chicago at the time. And he's just rapid firing questions about the company. Like, do you hate Vince McMahon? Would you cry if Vince died? Things like that. But then he starts to switch a little bit and he goes a different direction. He says, "Hey, Stephanie McMahon is hot. Do you think she's wild in the sack?" And Jerry admits, "I said the first thing that came into my mind. Well, that's what Bruce Prichard told me." Can't imagine that went over real well at your house or hers.
No, it didn't. Not at all. And, you know, again, it was Jerry Lawler in a desperate place. And I think he was saying things to hurt people and stir shit. And he accomplished that. But, you know, when that affects me personally at home, and obviously not true. I mean, you know, the innuendo was that I had an affair with Stephanie. Not true. Never in any way, shape, or form. She was my boss, and it just unnecessary, mean-spirited, and bad judgment on his part.
I mean, that's just, you know.
Yeah, again, but to me, that's you're fucking with people's family.
Yeah.
You know, here, you know, Hunter and Stephanie were together at the time, and it was.
You're married with kids.
I'm married with kids,
little kids.
Yes, with a mother-in-law that, for whatever reason, would scan and search my name from time to time or whatever. I don't know how the hell she ever saw it or whatever, but yeah, you know.
So what's that call sound like? Your wife calls and says, "Are you fucking Stephanie McMahon?"
No, not at all. I called her when I heard about it. I didn't hear about it. Somebody came to me and told me about it. I didn't hear it, obviously, but somebody came and told me, and I personally got a laugh out of it.
But you knew, hey, this ain't gonna be funny when other people misconstrue.
Well, no, and because immediately you don't think of the ramifications of it. You don't think about how it affects all these other people, and that it's just not cool. Not cool at all.
Well, let's fast forward. July 1st, 2001. Jerry is at the National Sports Card Convention in Cleveland, Ohio, and he gets a phone call from Kevin Dunn, and he's been waiting on that call for a long time. Kevin says that he's wanted him back on the shows all along, but that's one decision that was out of his control. And there's still some in the company who are against him coming back, but they had been overruled. And he wouldn't tell him who wanted him back and who didn't want him back, but he said he didn't really care because he was coming back. And he was really excited to call Stacy and tell her we had our jobs back. And Kevin and I pretty much had everything set. This was on Friday and we were supposed to be at TV on the following Monday. Stacy was at our condo in Fort Myers, Florida. She'd been there for over a week. Her father and stepmother were visiting from Texas, and she had been down there with them for several days. And I couldn't wait to call her and tell her the news. Needless to say, she was happy, but still a little apprehensive, as if the news was too good to be true. How right she was. The next day, Kevin Dunn called him again and said, Vince wanted me to make sure you understand one thing. Right now, the writers don't have anything in mind for Stacy to do. So she would just be brought back for this one show, but then would have to wait until they come up with a major storyline for her. It was a little change in plans, but nothing major. And I told Kevin I would call Stacy and then call him back. Sure enough, Stacy said she was used to that, so it wasn't a big deal. And when I called him back, things had changed again. Now he said Vince called him back and said that Stacy wasn't going to be under contract. She was only going to be used one time, and that was it. So in reality, Stacy wasn't getting her job back. It was just me. So I called JR and we had a long talk, and his advice to me was go ahead and come back. Once I was in place, I'd have a better chance of getting Stacy reinstated. And he felt confident that Stacy would eventually be given her job back if I was working with the company. Were you involved on the calls on the other side of the line? Not necessarily delivering them, but
No.
hey, he's coming back, but she's not. Or, I mean, were you involved in any of that?
Nope.
So, I mean, I thought I'm not saying to be argumentative. If you're not the writer, how do you not know that they're going to use them?
Again, working with Stephanie at the time, Stephanie McMahon. And this was something that Kevin wanted to do and run by Vince. I didn't deal with the on-air talent, the play-by-play and color guys. And I really didn't give a shit who it was. I didn't care if Lawler came back or not. If he bettered the show, awesome. Come on back. But they're not going to be sitting there calling me back and forth. Should we not? Not my decision. That's a television decision. Not mine.
Well, there's another phone call made, and this time she says, hey, just go ahead and do it. Tell him you'll come back. So he calls Kevin Dunn back and says, all right, I'll come back. And we'll bring Stacy this time, but after that, just me. And Kevin says, well, I talked to Vince again, and here's the deal, and I don't think you'll take it. Stacy can't come. Not this time, not ever, but we want you back. Take her to leave it. And he said, well, I'm going to leave it. I'm not coming without her. So that's the end. So then he calls Stacy when he gets back to the room, and she doesn't answer. And he calls the condo phone. He calls her cell phone, no answer. And he says, that's not ordinary for her. She's never out of phone contact. Her parents at this point have been gone a day or so. So she's down there in Florida by herself with all this bad news of this roller coaster of I'm back. Okay. I'm only back for today. Okay. I'm only back just this one time. Okay. I'm not back at all. And he continues to call, no answers. Finally, he calls the police in Fort Myers and asks an officer to go by and check our condo. And then the police call him back a half hour later and say, no one's there. Stacy's car wasn't there either. She had a reservation on AirTran to come home to Memphis on Sunday. And Frank suggested, hey, maybe she came home a day early. And when he couldn't get her on the phone, maybe that made sense. So he got someone to check Stacy's itinerary, and thank goodness Frank was right. She had changed her reservation. She'd left Florida a day earlier, but then the agent said something that didn't make any sense. She left Fort Myers earlier that day, but connected through Atlanta, and she's flying to another city, not Memphis. And that's when he's very confused and everything's a blur. Around 10 the next morning, she finally answered her phone, and the first words out of his mouth are, Stacy, where are you? He said she sounded fine, and she had decided to fly home early. And when she landed, her sister picked her up at the airport and asked if she wanted to go with her with some friends to the Tennessee River about 100 miles from Memphis to go water skiing. And she decided to go, and her cell phone didn't have reception up there. Strangely enough, it was working now, and they were leaving to drive back and would be back in Memphis around 6 p.m. The same time the agent said she would be landing in Memphis on AirTran. I wanted to believe Stacy, but something told me she was lying. I talked to her for a while and had her describe what all she'd done on the trip, and it was all very convincing. Eventually, he put a few things together and decided he was going to see if she was somewhere she actually wasn't. He went to the airport to see if she was getting off a plane she wasn't supposed to be on. Once they both got home, Jerry confronted her, and she told him she wanted a divorce. She moved to Florida and ended up finding herself with another man. And Jerry was devastated by this, and lots of rumor and innuendo about that. Not a good time for our man, the king, here.
Yeah, bummer.
It's the worst timing ever to be, on this roller coaster of fighting for your wife to have a job and then find out she's leaving and there's another dude. A few months pass and, Stacy's gone and he calls you to see if he could mend some fences that he knew he'd damaged. And he says you were very gracious. Y'all had a long talk and that you weren't upset or angry and that you didn't hold any grudges. And you guys talked about him coming back and you suggested that he call Vince. And the next day he called JR, same thing. They talked for a long time and JR's advice was concentrate on the business, meaning, the business at hand, meaning the divorce from Stacy. And once he got that behind him, then talk to Vince about coming back. I'm curious. Do you think he called you first because he knew he had, slandered you on Man Cow and wanted to make sure he had your blessing before he made the pitch?
I don't know why he called me. I don't know if he called me first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever it is, but I appreciated the call. I appreciated him reaching out. I told him how I felt at the time. And I also told him, King, I understand being upset. I understand doing stupid shit. Lord knows I've done stupid shit. Okay. And it's, you know what? Life's too short to hold grudges. Life's too short to be upset over everything. It's one thing, you do something, people react. Life's just too short. I told him I loved him as a talent. I thought he was a great talent and he was missed. I like Jerry personally. I explained to him the effect that it's had on my family. Not cool, which he apologized. I accepted his apology. Why continue to harbor a grudge and be pissed off over something that didn't matter anymore? So, that's why when people rehash shit and you go, oh, fuck, get over it. Next. And I did encourage him. I encouraged him. I didn't get into his personal life. I don't care about his personal life. That's his personal life. My personal life is my personal life. What I choose to share, that's my decision to share, not somebody else's. So, I wished him well and let him know that in no way, shape, or form did I ever prevent him in any way coming back, and that when his name had come up, that I was very positive and said that, yeah, he was missed and would like to have you back. And I hope it can work out. But if you think that I have that influence to make that happen, I don't. And if you're worried about coming back and facing me, I'm going to shake your hand and welcome you back. And I mean it. And I did mean it. So, obviously heard through the grapevine he was going through hard times. Very sorry about that. That sucks. So, that was my suggestion. Call, and you're calling the wrong person if you think that it's me that's going to be able to change anything. Cause I don't know what conversations you've had with Kevin and or Vince or anybody else, but you and I, we're good. We're cool.
Jerry wrote that, Raw had been in Nashville and the next day they were doing SmackDown in Memphis and he got a call from JR. It was like 1 a.m. And he said, hey, come to the Pyramid and see everybody and just hang out. And he said, everybody misses you. And he told JR, he didn't want it to look like to Vince that he was down there begging for a job. And he says at WWE shows, you see guys backstage who are just hanging around. I think it's sad these guys are just hoping to get noticed or begging for a job, so to speak. But JR had said he'd already told Vince that he might come. And Vince said, well, tell him he has a big hug from me. So once he goes to the Pyramid, he said it was like, his old home and he'd only been gone for a week and it was like they never missed a beat. And it was a very good feeling. And he said someone had been in the production meeting that morning and told me that Vince had said he might come to visit. And he asked everyone to make me feel welcome. And they did. When he went to Vince's office, he didn't know what to expect, but as soon as he saw him, Vince gave him a big hug and said, King, this is your home. And whenever you get your personal problems straightened out, we would love to have you back. What do you remember about that day? Seeing Lawler wandering around again?
Welcome. He said hello, welcome, and moved on. It wasn't a big deal. and everybody was cordial to him and nice. It really had no reason to be. We didn't fire him. He chose to leave.
He, believe it or not, doesn't come right back though. He starts a conversation with the XWF and actually signs a contract with them in November. And they had a lot of guys sign there: Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, Mr. Perfect, Jimmy Hart, Bobby Heenan, Gene Okerlund, the Nasty Boys, the Road Warriors, the former Sable, Mark Mero. And he goes to their tapings in Orlando on November 13th and 14th. And while he's there, he gets a call from Kevin Dunn. And Kevin said he thought the timing was right for him to come back. What a coincidence. It would fit in perfectly in the storyline for him to return, witness the end of the alliance. And not only did they want me to return, but they wanted me at Monday's Raw. And he says, there's no way I could make it there on Monday. I was now under contract to the XWF. It would have been impossible for me to get out of that contract unless they wanted to let me out. I was bound to them contractually for at least 90 days. And I told Kevin Dunn I would talk to the XWF bosses and see what could be done. I met with Jimmy Hart and one of the owners and told them my dilemma. I didn't want to put them in a bind, but everyone knew, especially Jimmy Hart, that WWE is where I wanted to be. And it was decided they didn't want to force anyone to be there if they'd rather be somewhere else. So they let him out of the rest of his contract. And he returned on November 19th, 2001, the night after the Survivor Series, where the WWF won over the Alliance. And in storyline, Vince fired Paul Heyman the next night on Raw. So as Heyman is being drug out by security, Vince announces Jerry as his replacement, and he comes out to a huge pop. What do you remember about that night, seeing the King come back and take his rightful spot?
Happy for him. And that was his rightful spot. And it was nice to see him back, but again, it's another day at the office. It wasn't, it wasn't Hulk coming back, but it was a very important cog in that wheel that helped him move a lot smoother.
We haven't talked about the XWF here on the show. What was the reaction that you guys inside the castle looking out thought of the XWF? I mean,
I have no idea what the hell it is.
Jimmy Hart and, Brian Knobs are two office people, and,
no clue.
Tony Schiavone said that tells you all you need to know. Anyway.
Yeah.
He's back with open arms. He's doing commentary over the next few years. In 2003, Jerry and JR start a feud with the Sunday Night Heat commentators, Al Snow and Jonathan Coachman. On September 1st, 2003, Coach would pin Jerry Lawler, after about 4 minutes after Al Snow turned heel and rammed Lawler into the ring post. Then they had a match at the Unforgiven show, September 28th, with Al Snow teaming with Jonathan Coachman to beat JR and, Jerry Lawler. Jericho would interfere here and drop kick JR from behind. Got a quarter star. It sort of is what it is, but the loss made Jerry and JR lose their commentary spot to Coach and Snow on Raw. But of course they wind up having a rematch with Coachman, or JR does, and JR wins. So they get to keep that job. And they do commentary mostly for the next few years. And in 2006, during the ECW relaunch, Jerry starts insulting ECW again, much like he did a decade before. And that leads to a match with him and Taz at the ECW pay-per-view One Night Stand. And that's actually a rematch from SummerSlam 2000 and, One Night Stand 2006. Taz would choke out Jerry with the Taz mission. Taz wins in like 30 seconds. And then in 2007, Jerry finally gets to go into the Hall of Fame, and William Shatner inducts him. Back in 95, of course, Shatner was a guest on King's Court to promote his TV show Tech War. And, Shatner monkey flipped JR. Jerry finally had that WrestleMania match after you were gone at WrestleMania 27 versus Michael Cole. Lawler initially won by submission, but the anonymous Raw general manager would reverse the decision due to Steve Austin, who was the referee, physically getting involved in the match by pushing Cole and making Cole the winner by disqualification. So you weren't there at the time, but what do you think it meant to Jerry Lawler to finally have a match at WrestleMania?
Well, I do know what it meant. It was a big deal to him because that was something that if you're in the business, you want to be on the biggest show in the world. So he wanted to be in it. The issue is that he was more valuable as a color commentator.
It's interesting because, I think older fans recognize him as being, the top guy in Memphis and one of the top regional stars ever, and one of the best talkers ever. And, the guy who could get a great match out of a broomstick, and the guy who knew how to tell a story and get heat and blah, blah, blah. But a whole other generation of people just know him as the guy behind the desk with JR, and one half of maybe the most iconic duo in wrestling commentary history. What do you think Lawler's legacy will be?
The king of Memphis. I think that, Jerry transcended with his stuff with Andy Kaufman. For the younger generation, he's always going to be the color guy and puppies. But I do believe that for the true wrestling fan and for Jerry, as his legacy is going to go down as the king of Memphis and the king of wrestling in Memphis. So that's what it'll always be to me.
Well, Turo will always be my go-to for renting a car. Whenever I'm out of town, I'll fire up my Turo app that I've got on my phone, and I see what's available just so I can try some fun stuff. And it sure is a lot more fun than going down to the rental desk at the airport. See, Turo is a peer-to-peer car sharing marketplace where you can book any car you want, wherever you want, from a community of local hosts. If that sounds familiar, it's probably because it's that thing for cars. It's awesome. From exotic sports cars to practical daily drivers, you can choose the best car for you, whatever your budget. So do what I did. Download the Turo app. That's Turo on the App Store or Google Play, or visit Turo.com. Get $25 off your first trip when you sign up for Turo and use the promo code WRESTLE at checkout. Now, terms apply, but I'm telling you, this is awesome. Bruce has checked it out. I love it. I've used it for a while. It's Turo, Turo, or visit Turo.com. Bruce, we've got a big show this weekend, with Eric Bischoff. And then next weekend, you and I are going to be in Indiana and then Ohio. And, a couple of weeks after that, you'll be in Sydney. I'll be in Chicago with Tony Schiavone and Eric Bischoff. And then WrestleMania weekend, the Saturday before, you and I are together at Gramercy Theater at a matinee show. But then our new super show is going to be me with good old JR, and you'll eventually join us right after Monday Night Raw. So the Raw after WrestleMania is the hottest, biggest, baddest show of the year. And we're going to be there just a couple of steps from the Barclays Center. Pick up tickets for all these shows right now at bruceprichard.com. And, I guess, we're here. We've not said a lot on the subject. Do you want to, clear up any rumor and innuendo and set the record straight? Because it feels like everybody has had something to say about what you're doing and what we're doing and what's changing and what's not changing, but we've sort of been mum's the word about it.
About what?
The news, the rumor and innuendo, the clickbait.
Oh hell. That, I'm extremely proud, extremely happy to be back in the family at WWE. And, I had my first TVs back this past week, had an absolute blast seeing everybody and being back in the fold. And we'll see, this isn't, not being coy or anything like that. It's a lot still needs to be worked out as far as what my role will be. And
whoa, hang on now. It said you were Vince's right hand man and the head of creative.
Who said that?
I mean, the internet.
Yeah, well, there you go, folks. Look, I'm going to come back and help out wherever I can be most valuable. And we're working through it. We're figuring out where I might fit best and how and what and why and everything else. And it's something that happened pretty quickly with me going to TV, and I've got to see a lot has changed in 10 years, and I have to see where I fit in. They have to see where I fit in and how and what have you. So there's still a lot of questions to be answered, and I'm looking forward to an incredible journey. So, as far as what we're doing with the podcast,
well, hang on. Let me ask, are we canceling any live shows?
No, absolutely not. Every live show that we have advertised, we're going to be there.
But realistically, if your schedule continues like this, there's going to have to be fewer, if any, live shows after these. Fair to say?
Fair. That is fair to say, because if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it 100%.
Well, I mean, let's talk about it. You can't necessarily do the show right before the pay-per-view if you're like, you know, working
in the pay-per-view. Yeah.
So that's the thing that tickled me, is it's like, well, no more live shows. It's like, well, I mean, maybe one here or there realistically, but with this new crazy schedule you're about to be on, there's a lot of 18-hour days in your future. But so the next question is, and we got this whenever we announced that we were going to do a show on the WWE network too. Everybody thought, wow, the show's over. Are we canceling the podcast?
No, sir, we're not. And we're going to figure out, you know, what it's going to be, where it's going to be, and all of that good stuff. And all those questions are still to be answered. And we're working our way through it, and probably, you know, we're going to experiment with some things and have some fun and see where we go. But,
and let me say, don't read too much into that, because here's what we're talking about. Maybe some of this, the poll ends on Tuesday and we tape on Thursday. Maybe that has to change because travel schedules and whatnot. But, I want everybody to know I'm committed to doing this show. And last I checked, you were too. So the show's going to stick around. We appreciate your support. We're not going anywhere. Yes, we were fucking with you at the beginning of this because we're assholes. But we're excited about Bruce's new position. And I realize this means a lot of you are going to hate, and you're going to say, oh, well, Bruce is going to start kissing Triple H's ass. When the fuck did he stop? That's the nature of the show. So, you know, Bruce, just get your chapstick ready, and we'll see you next week at Friday at noon.
I'm not going to say Shaka Khan.
Is there anything else you want to address for everybody? Because seriously, you know, I knew when Mike Johnson broke the story, oh fuck, my phone's about to blow up and I'm out of town. I just need to turn this off. So I just went silent on social media until we had time for you to actually, you know, do your fucking new job. And then we could talk after, because let's not kid ourselves. When you and I first started this show, what did you put the odds of you ever going back to the company at?
About 100,000 to 1.
Yeah. How about 0? Nobody ever thought this was going to happen. And now you are. And so no matter what anybody says, it's gotta be a good feeling to you to roam those halls again, where maybe you thought you never would be again, and to feel welcome and wanted and like you're contributing and sort of back in the saddle, even though maybe it's a different horse, maybe it's a different saddle. You're doing what you love, and man, fuck it, I'm happy for you. And
well, I tell you, man, it's an incredible feeling. And it's really, it's just hard to articulate sometimes the excitement and how good it feels. Sometimes I get a little overwhelmed with it and have to pinch myself, but it was, I remember walking out into the arena in Houston. And this was, guys, this all happened really, really fast. And it wasn't something that I solicited or anything else. It happened from, just going down to say hello and talking about things and what have you. But I walked out, which I haven't been to a WWE show. Went to NXT and I got the feeling, but I haven't been to a WWE show and been out in the audience in a long time. And I felt that electricity again. And it's hard to explain. It's goosebumps. It's magical. It's something when you look at it and go, God, to be a part of it is exciting. And it's pretty damn cool. So, I was a little overwhelmed and probably will be for a few weeks. It's like drinking water out of a fire hose. But it's exciting as shit. And I welcome everybody to come along on the ride with us, and we'll have some fun. I know I am.
Can we still like mock Johnny Ace's voice and say doot, doot, doot and shit like that though?
That's how I greeted Michael Hayes this Monday with doot, doot, doot.
Yeah, dude, I'm so happy for you. You know, when we had that conversation last week and you were just, it was still so fresh and raw. It was like one of the happiest moments in our run together. And I know that a lot of people just automatically assume the worst, but, dude, I'm fucking thrilled for you. And I know that you're back where you belong and where you're having fun. And I hope our listeners appreciate that too. And, you know, we're definitely making all of our live shows and nothing's canceled. And, oh, hey, real fast. Are you still allowed to come to StarCast? Because that's going to be the next rumor that you're not allowed to come.
Oh, I'm planning on being there.
Yeah. So there you go. Something to wrestle. The last live show we've marketed and we've advertised and we've promoted. So if you haven't already, you need to come see us on one of these final shows, because I don't know what our schedule will allow, but, we're still going to be here for you every Friday at noon, somehow, some way, same bat time, same bat channel. We appreciate your support. And man, back in August of 2016, who the fuck would have thought this was going to happen?
Not I, but it's kind of fun, huh?
Dude, it's the fucking wildest ride ever. Except how about, getting that first flight out and walking around in dress shoes on concrete floors instead of just hanging out in your pajamas all day? That's a big difference, huh?
Yeah. I had to walk quite a ways versus the 15 yards from the bedroom to the office.
In your fucking house shoes and your fishing shirt and your basketball shorts, looking like Kevin Owens' dad.
Yeah. I don't put the shirt on until like about 11:30.
It's lot things, they are a changing, but we appreciate you guys being around. What an incredible story this podcast has been. And, we thank you guys for all the opportunities. I mean, we got on here and you fucking just ripped TNA to shreds, and they brought you in, and then you got to hang and produce some TV for MLW. And then we had the network show and then live shows, and holy shit, man. I can't wait to see what's next. And I'm so thankful that you guys have joined us on the ride, and Bruce, that you, believed in a hillbilly redneck and said, "Hey man, let's do a podcast." And holy shit, right?
Holy shit, and rock on, Shaka Khan.
See you next week right here on Something to Wrestle With. Show's not over. Bruce Prichard.